Testing. Oh. Okay, I will call the September 21st board meeting to order. Since 6 o'clock p.m., the board has been in closed session to consider the following. Discussion of minutes of meetings lawfully closed under the Open Meetings Act for purposes of approval by the body of the minutes or semi-annual review of the minutes as mandated by Section 2.06. The appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the district or legal counsel for the district. And litigation, when an action against, affecting, or on behalf of the particular district has been filed and is pending before a court or administrative tribunal. I will entertain a motion to come out of closed session.
So moved. Second.
A motion and a second are heard. Please call the roll.
Fitzgerald.
Aye.
Wanke.
Aye.
Kosminski.
Aye.
Leong.
Nay.
Yangror.
Aye.
Gerke.
Aye.
Kush.
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes. We are in open session. Good evening and welcome to the September 21st board meeting. Our mission is to educate students to be self-directed learners, collaborative workers, complex thinkers, quality producers, and community contributors. Please call the roll, Mrs. Patton.
Board members present this evening: Kristen Fitzgerald, Donna Wanke, Charles Kush, Paul Leong, Joe Kosminski, Christine Gerke, Janet Yangror, and our student ambassadors are present this evening: William Ma and Shay Doshi.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we have reached the point in our agenda for good news.
Okay, we have great news this evening. National Merit Corporation announced that 48 students from District 203 are semifinalists in the 66th Annual National Merit Scholarship Program. These students have the opportunity to continue in the competition for scholarships that will be offered to them in the spring. Naperville Central High School National Merit semifinalists to be celebrated include Vishrusha Bandupalli, Nicholas Bird, Andrea Brew, Alicia Chen, Asta Chohan, Elliot Clements, Michael Dang, Stephen Desch, Dane Engman, Aiden Falkins, Arthur Graham, Brandon Hager, Mayakuthi Nukula, Simeon Lee, Kate Lee, Elizabeth Liu, our very own William Ma, congratulations, Amisha Sethi, Anna Sasoshen, Pari Tanakachalam, David Wang, Zion Wang, Colin Yao, Brandon Zhang, and Jasmine Zhang. Celebrating these students from Naperville North as National Merit semifinalists: Luca Bola, Skylar Kong, Jubin Key, Judson Lamb, Maisie Lee, David Mengel, Holden Moi, Elena Wynn, Owen O'Brien, Ashu Rajugopal, Aaron Risich, Arjun Shah, Rachel Shee, Randall Schobert, Janelle Smith, Aditu Tulia, Catherine Watson, Wyatt Walker, Jeffrey Wu, Eva Yang, Rachel Yao, Irene Zhang, and Emily Zhao. Congratulations to these students for this accomplishment.
That is indeed good news. Congratulations to all those students. All right, we have reached the point of our agenda for public comment. The Board of Education welcomes comments from the public at its meetings. Citizens who wish to address the Board of Education should identify themselves by name and home address. Comments by individuals shall be limited to 3 minutes. If the individual is representing multiple individuals or a group, they shall be allowed to speak for 5 minutes. Issues raised in public comment will be taken under advisement by the Board of Education, but will not be discussed this evening. Issues raised during public participation may be added to future agendas or addressed by administrative staff. The superintendent is the board's designee to coordinate response to public comment and will apprise the board accordingly. At this point, I would like to welcome Mary Kate Watkins.
Hello. I grew up here in Naperville. I attended 203 schools, and I currently have a daughter enrolled in first grade. I stand here today to implore everyone here to work together in providing a metric-driven, transparent path back to in-person learning. I have to commend our teachers for working incredibly hard to replicate a school experience. My daughter has a phenomenal teacher who was incredibly prepared and is exceeding my expectations for remote learning. But unfortunately, this is an impossible task for even the best and most prepared teachers, because virtual elementary school is not and simply cannot be the same as being in a classroom. What I continue to hear is that we want students to return to the classroom, but we want it to be safe. What does safe mean? Sadly, COVID will not be eradicated in the near future, even with a vaccine. If you ask any person what safe looks like for them or their family, you would get a different answer. The district can't possibly provide a plan that is tailor-made to each individual family's comfort level. The district needs to be more transparent how it defines safe. Then each family and each employee of the district can decide for themselves if they are comfortable with the metrics and evaluation process. In the original plan, I applauded the option for the online academy for families who are not comfortable being in a classroom. While the online academy option may have not had the specific courses those families were hoping for, and the hybrid option certainly did not fulfill the desire for those who wanted a full 5-day-a-week in-person learning, I understood that we all had to make a shared sacrifice in order to comply with the many state and CDC guidelines. It was disappointing and confusing when the district pivoted to a completely remote model and did not provide transparent reasons as to why, or any specific metrics on how it plans to return to in-person learning. You cited one of the primary reasons you couldn't implement the plan was the change in state guidelines. If that is true, then why have so many of our neighboring public school districts have been able to at least get their elementary students back in the classroom in some capacity? How are all of our private schools in our community have been open for in-person learning for a month now? Why would Ann Reed be closed, but nearly all daycare and preschools in our community are open, leaving behind the youngest and most vulnerable students in our district? We are one of the top school systems in this country. I think we can do better than this. The plan states we'll evaluate the situation every 6 weeks. I asked the district to define what specific public health or educational metrics are you looking at to evaluate, and what benchmarks do we need to see to move forward? If you are specific in what you need to move to in-person learning, you give our community the chance to respond. Do you need to see a certain % positivity rate? Do you need better PPE? Do you need better symptom screening measures? A bigger subpool? We have a great community. So many of its members will step up to help. Tell us what you need. My concern with the lack of transparency is that we create a feeling of distrust towards our district leadership, and the effects of that will extend long after this COVID crisis. Please be transparent, involve our community in your decision-making, and prioritize a return to in-person learning. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Kate. Thank you for coming on behalf of the whole board. At this point, I would like to call Greg Pulver.
It's Greg Polheber. Thank you for allowing me to speak. And before I forget, I wanted to thank the teachers. I think we have a lot of dedicated, professional, caring teachers out there. I have 2 kids in elementary school, 4th grade, 2nd grade. But frankly, the e-learning, they're struggling. And the kids really need to get back into the school. And I'm just concerned that the school district might be focused on the benefits, what they're seeing with e-learning, and not really focusing on the kids that they're missing. I'm concerned that there might be more focus on improving e-learning as opposed to just getting the kids back in the classroom. Under e-learning, I've seen my 4th grade daughter, who's an avid reader and learner, basically dread logging in. She can't handle the screens, logging in and out, knowing where she's supposed to be. She's totally overwhelmed, and she's just glazed over all day. At night, she used to read. I used to have to take the books away from her. Now, she doesn't even want to read. Like, she doesn't care about learning. It's frustrating to see. I saw my second grade son scream at his teacher during a lesson because he didn't understand what to do. That's not him. That's the frustration he's dealing with. And I consider myself so fortunate because I'm in a situation where I can stay home and work, but I'm on a laptop. I'm trying to, do my job to pay the mortgage and help these kids. And I can't be with them every second of the day. And I can't help but think about the parents who have to work, who aren't as fortunate as me. What are they doing with their kids? Are their kids learning at all? I know my second grade son, he spends large blocks of time just running through the house. He's not actively learning. He's not engaged. His behavior has changed. He is changing. He needs to go back into the school. I moved here from out of state. I could have moved anywhere in the country. I lived in Naperville once before, and I thought, where can I go in this country that has the funding, the policymakers, the people in charge that can put a plan in place to get the kids back into the schools? And I said, Naperville. Let's go to Naperville. We made plans in July. We got here and the schools closed down. It is so frustrating to see it. I don't understand how the other schools are going back, providing services to the kids when Naperville can't. If you guys don't have a system in place that can get kids and reach the kids that need help, you are failing in your job. They need services beyond a computer screen. They need to be back in person. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg, on behalf of the whole board. All right, at this point, I would like to call Tom Koutsos.
My name is Tom Koutsos. I live on 2988 Valley Forge Road in Lisle. I wanted to come here today to speak to you guys in person. You don't have to write notes. You can look at me in the face. You'll get the message here. In March, me and my wife thought our daughter was autistic, so we came to the Ann Reed to get her evaluated. Great school, great teachers. We got her evaluated, and she was listed on a developmental delay. COVID hit. She approximately had 8 days in school. We had known before that there could be more of a delay, so we waited 9 months to get a psychomedical evaluation, only to know that she was level 2 autistic. Just to give you a little insight of what we do on a day-to-day basis. There is no activity. She gets no stimulation. This girl does not sleep. Me and my wife are up endless hours of the day to make sure she rests. She gets up and she's put in front of a TV screen, a laptop. She rubs her eyes after the first 7 minutes because all the activity on the screen sort of causes some grand mal seizures. We talk about a partnership in the rhetoric from District 203. This is not a partnership. The insulated bubble that you guys live in isn't the bubble of the working man. Not at all. We talk about a partnership and being in this together. Has anyone in this room taken any type of haircut? Probably not. Anyone have a forbearance on their home? I would put a lot of money saying no. Not at all. But we sit here and we have failed our kids. You guys, Dan Bridges, have failed our kids. This is a travesty. There should be 3,000 people out there instead of 500. But everyone's scared. Just sheep along. We need to stand up for these kids. We need to fight for our kids, especially special needs and IEP kids. You guys have failed. This is a joke, an absolute joke. You guys should be ashamed of yourself. Kids sitting there on the screen trying to hold a 4-year-old autistic girl down like a greased hog. Pay attention, pay attention. You think that's doing anything? You guys honestly think that's doing anything? It's not, and it's a joke. It is an absolute travesty of what you guys have done. My message is this: done with diplomacy. All the rhetoric, the narratives, the bounce-back emails, because you guys are spineless and you won't return a phone call. Done with diplomacy. One word, Dan: do your job. Do your job.
Thank you, Tom, for coming on behalf of the whole board. We will take now Chris Sidigi. Sorry for my pronunciation. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Chris Salagi. I'm a District 203 resident. I have 2 children, Noel, who is 4 and will be a kindergarten student in 2021, and Keegan, who would have been a first grader at Prairie Elementary School. this year, but my wife and I have chosen to enroll him in Catholic school so he can have an in-person learning experience this year. He attended Prairie last year as a kindergarten. My purpose in speaking tonight is to ask the board and the superintendent to provide parents and students with a choice for in-person learning. Last school year, my wife and I, our family, loved our homeschool at Prairie Elementary. The teachers, the leadership, the school community was nothing short of amazing. The problem is that I'm using the words loved and was, both past tense. The school community, like all other schools in District 203, no longer exists. And that's because of the board's and superintendent's failure to provide an in-person learning experience for our students. I do believe that families that want and need e-learning should have that choice. But I ask, why is it that only families that desire remote learning are being served while the rest of us are not given an option, while our kids are not given an option? The vast majority, potentially 80 to 90% of your families in District 203 desire an in-person learning experience for their child. However, we've been forced to succumb to an unsustainable, less desirable model that fails to meet the needs of the whole child. The examples and failures of e-learning are vast, and I don't intend to go into them tonight. But I will say, if you believe that your current model is serving the vast majority of students successfully, then you don't deserve to be in the role that you're in, because our students are losing essential academic and social-emotional skills exponentially by not being in person for learning. The superintendent has spoke at board meetings about the health guidelines and how failure to meet those could put the district in a liable position. My question is, why can't the district meet the guidelines and protocols that have been set forth? District 203 is blessed with more human and financial resources than most all of our neighboring school districts and school districts across the state. The superintendent has also spoke of current coronavirus conditions and rising cases. My question is, what metrics are you specifically referring to? Phase 4 of the governor's plan allows for in-person instruction. Recent DuPage County health metrics place our county in the moderate stage for transmission, which allows for in-person learning also. Neither of these recommendations from either places or metrics have shifted. In-person learning has been accomplished in districts that border us, in a district that is comparable to us. It's been accomplished with far less resources than District 203. Neighboring district right next to us is bringing back students 5 days a week, all 13 of their elementary students daily for in-person learning. I've had the opportunity to lead that and see that firsthand. People are asking for in-person learning because they love their schools, they love their teachers, and they love and want what is best for their kids. The timelines associated with your current return to learn plan lack urgency and don't meet the standard that is deserved by our community and our students. It's an inherent and moral responsibility for each one of you board members and the superintendent to provide an in-person learning experience for our students sooner rather than later. Failure to do so is unacceptable. Too much time has already passed, and our kids' lives depend on this. Please do what is right.
Thank you, Chris, on behalf of the whole board. All right, I would like to call at this time Catherine Kingsbury.
Good evening. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak. I'm Catherine Kingsbury. I live at 132 Settlers Drive in Naperville. I'm going to address my remarks specifically to you because I know, Mr. Bridges, that the buck stops with you with regard to all of these decisions. And I have a question and I have a suggestion. I was just over at Rotary Hill, and I'm not sure if you're aware at the amount of people who showed up today to rally for in-person learning. There were children, there were football teams, there were parents, there were grandparents, there were community members that are very concerned. Now, I've sat through board meetings and I've seen you all, no offense, congratulate one another for all the work you've done to put all of these things together that you've done. It looks like it's been very time-consuming. This email that came out recently with all of these preparations and enhanced e-learning and all of this stuff is really a slap in the face to those of us who don't want to see a word salad of what you haven't done. We went to lockdown in March. As soon as our little school in Texas, where I'm from, adjourned in March, they had the community, They had the administrators, they had the superintendent, they had the board members roll their sleeves up, get going, and start a plan. They worked throughout the summer to change all of the stuff inside of the school that needed to be changed, the mitigation, all of the preparation, all the PPE. As far as I can see in the building, and I have been in the building, nothing has been done. And you said we were going to return for hybrid on August 20th, but I have to challenge you all and say, how could that be? How could we have been back in the school, at this school? I have 2 children in this school, 2 varsity cheerleaders and 1 drum major. We're not seeing any changes that were done. So how on earth could you have told us, and we told and communicated to our kids that there was an opportunity for hybrid learning? They got excited. They started talking to their friends. They said, we have a shot at this. We can at least have a little bit of school. But I'm really embarrassed to tell my kids, I'm sorry, the leaders told us that they were making preparations that weren't done. But looking at this email that you sent out recently was just flabbergasting to me. At the fact that it says, at stage 2, we are going to talk about making a plan. It's like, really? You haven't done that yet? How have you not done all of this yet? How are all of the phases not planned out? How have you not purchased all the PPE for all of this? How have you not made, I mean, it seems to those of us who have a working brain that there are not plans in place. I'm not going to tell my kids 6 more weeks because obviously you haven't done the work to get our kids back in school in 6 weeks. Be honest. Here's my suggestion, and I'm just going to finish my thought. I really implore you, Mr. Bridges, to make a video for the children, to reach out to the kids as a board, as the head of the board, to tell them you care, to tell them that you're interested in what they're going through, to speak to them personally, face to face, in video if that's all there is, and tell them what your plans are. Because as far as I can see, this board is all about talking and doing lip service, but it's not about addressing the children in there who matter most. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine, for coming on behalf of the whole board. At this point, I would like to call Marty Philipchuk.
Hi, my name is Marty Philipchuk. I have 2 kids in District 203. I have a first grader who's in the dual language program, and I have a 4-year-old autistic son who attends Ann Reed. He's supported by the wonderful staff at Ann Reed, and I think it's a remarkable place. He has made such progress in the past year. He started when he was 3. Unfortunately, that all stopped when we went to online learning. He had summer school, and we would have these Zoom calls, and he would scream and cry to try to get him back in front of the screen. We started this year, and his condition, it requires intense physical, social engagement, behavioral modeling. He learns by watching others, by being taught what to do, to learn eye contact, and that's unfortunately not something that you can learn over Zoom, and it is heartbreaking, to see him regress so much in these past few months. I know there's a lot of parents here who are upset with their kids not being in school, but kids with IEPs, they really do need to be in person. Anything that we can do to get these children back in school, I beg you to please consider it. They need our help, they need your help. They need intervention early, which is what District 203 has done. I am in love with Ann Reed and the teachers and the staff there. They treat my son like family, and they truly do love him, and they want to see him succeed. And to watch this regression is just truly heartbreaking. So I'm just asking the board to please consider sending children with special needs and children with IEPs back to school for in-person learning. Thank you.
Thank you, Marty, on behalf of the whole board. At this point, I would like to call Amanda Malarkey.
Thank you. I am here to advocate for my children. I have 2 children in the district, a kindergartner and a 3rd grader. But I'm also here to advocate for all of the kids in this community. Many of us want to see schools open to the greatest extent allowed. That doesn't mean we are telling you or expecting you just to throw open the gates, but to go by the guidelines and do what we can. We look around, we see casinos are open, bars are open, bounce house play places are open, daycares are open, and we wonder why not schools. It's not developmentally appropriate for kids as young as 5 to be on a screen for over 5 hours a day. It's not developmentally appropriate to isolate children indefinitely. We need leaders who will move forward with facts and transparency instead of fear. And I know we are all a little afraid. This is a pandemic, but we have guidelines, and I believe, and many parents believe, we can start to reopen safely. I'm here for Jamie, who is 5, who spent the first weeks of school sobbing because he's wanted to be a kindergartner at Prairie as long as he can remember. And he couldn't force himself to stay on Zoom all day, even though he has one of the best teachers in the world. I am here for other children who struggle in school, who have been struggling in school, and now their teachers can't see their papers, and their teachers are depending on them to ask for help. And if you've ever seen a struggling elementary school child, they are not asking for help. They are blending in and they're losing time. That's hard to get back. And most importantly, I'm advocating for the child in our community who has told me, in all seriousness, that every single day is the worst day ever. The e-learning is not only damaging children's education, but it's having a terrible toll on their mental health. So to hear an 8-year-old child tell me every day is the worst day, that scares me. And I really hope that the board can work together and the district can start bringing kids back. And Jamie, do you want to say your quick thing?
My name is Jamie. I'm in kindergarten. I want to see my friends. I want to see my teacher. E-learning hurts my eyes. E-learning makes me sad. E-learning makes me feel this is the worst day ever.
Oh, buddy.
I want all schools to be open. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
On behalf of the whole board, I want to thank you for coming, Amanda, and thank you for coming, Jamie. All right, at this point, I would like to call Eric Malloy.
Hello, I'm Eric Mallory. I have 2 sons in this district, and in March and April, I was all for the lockdown. Let's do the right thing. Let's stay inside. Let's keep away. I would go to the store. I'd get up early as I could, avoid people, do the right thing. But time has passed, and it's time to get back. I mean, I'm embarrassed when I think about what my grandparents would think of what we're doing. We were a nation of fighters. What have we become? I mean, are we just going to give up? We can go back to school. Everyone else is. There's only a few ways out of this. A vaccine, herd immunity, and I forgot the 3rd one. But I think you know what that one is. So that's just what I was saying. Let's get it together. I mean, the kids need it, the parents need it, the society needs it. Thank you.
On behalf of the whole board, thank you for coming, Eric. And I'd like to call at this point Tricia Quizon.
Notice to cease and desist. On behalf of myself and all the parents and students similarly situated and affected by the unlawful actions of the board and its members, please allow the notice to cease and desist as service demanded in the Naperville Community Unit High School District 203, Dan Bridges, Superintendent, Kristen Fitzgerald, President, and all the respective school board members to cease and desist the current and ongoing school closures and all other educational plans in place as a result of the Governor of Illinois Disaster Declaration pursuant to Section 7 of the Illinois Emergency Management Agency Act, as stated in Executive Order 2020-15, March 27, 2020, and all other efforts and actions that violate state and federal law and the rights of citizens and students affected. We demand, therefore, you cease and desist such unlawful actions immediately based on the following: that on July 2, 2020, an Illinois Circuit Court in Clay County, Illinois, ruled that any executive orders issued by Governor Pritzker in effect after April 8, 2020, finding their authority under the emergency powers of Section 7 of the IEMMA were void, that the authority delegated to the Illinois State Board of Education, allowing the state superintendent of education and respective school superintendents to address the minimum requirements of the school calendar and the school day, and any other education and plans implemented as a result of the Governor Illinois Disaster Declaration pursuant to Section 7 of the Illinois Emergency Agency Act, as stated in the executive order. That any ongoing and continuing enforcement and implementation of school closure, in-classroom suspension, or any attempt by Naperville Community Unit District 203 to prevent 100% in-classroom attendance for any and all students affected in a violation of Illinois law pursuant to compulsory attendance requirements, as stated in Illinois complied statutes, as a violation of the Clay County Circuit Court's ruling, that the continued unlawful enforcement and implementation of the in-classroom suspension adopted and implemented by the Naperville Community Unit District 203 will result in legal action seeking, including but not limited to, injunction and restraining order, punitive and compensatory civil damages, potential criminal liability, and all other equitable remedies provided by state and federal law. Thank you.
Thank you, Tricia, for coming on behalf of the whole board. I would like to call now Olivia. I don't have a last name. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Olivia Keyson, and I was so excited to go back to my school, and now it's just so hard. I'm in 6th grade, and I was so excited to go back, and it's just so hard to sit on a computer for 7 hours every day, not be able to see my friends or my teachers. It's just so hard. I can't stand it anymore. Everything gets mixed up, and it's all this pressure and anxiety. I just can't stand it. I want to see my teachers. I want to see my friends in person, not on a screen for 7 hours. Sometimes I get kicked out. I can't hear my teachers. I can't hear my friends. I can't hear people that are talking. I can't hear anybody sometimes. Sometimes it's so bad that my computer gets shut down. I have to restart it, and then I have to wait for them to let me back in, and then I won't be able to get caught up on my stuff, and it's just too hard for me. Thank you.
On behalf of the whole board, thank you for coming, Olivia. We especially like to hear from students like you and Jamie, so thank you for coming. And we're sorry for your experiences. All right, we will go to call Lisa Torsen.
Hi, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak. My name is Lisa Torsen at 2422 College Road Court in Lisle. I've actually been inspired by some of these guys to speak tonight. I wasn't planning on it, but I want to give you guys feedback from some things that I heard on the board meeting where you were talking about switching from hybrid to e-learning. And there were 3 big points that I want to talk about. And the first one of you mentioned specifically a first grader not needing that much support. I have a first grader at Highlands Elementary, and I can tell you right now, he cannot get through the day without me by his side. And my question to you guys is, when was the last time you guys worked with first graders? Because it's not just my son. It's a lot of friends that I know who have first graders and have kindergartners and second graders, and they are struggling. So they do need the support in person from the teacher. The second comment that was made was that e-learning was going to allow the students to have better relationships with their teachers and with classmates. And I can tell you right now, 3 weeks in, our teacher is fantastic, but it's just not there. Last year, my son would come home and he would rave about his friends and about his teacher. It's not happening. And I know that it's not just my son and that it's a lot more people out there. And my third point was that your answer to the dual working parents was to rely on the Y program, the Champions and Safe and Sound. How is that any different than having our kids be in school? We have daycares open. My 4-year-old has been going to school. She loves it. She's never been more excited to go back. Daycares are open. Catholic schools are open. Private schools are open. Why can't we? We are such an amazing district, and at some point, something's got to give. So if there are other people out there, why can't we figure out how to get it done? I implore you, please get our kids back to school as soon as possible. Thank you.
On behalf of the whole board, I want to thank you for coming, Lisa. At this point, I don't have any more slips of paper for public comment requests. Does anyone else in the audience wish to address the Board of Education? Okay, so that will conclude our public comment period. And as we finish the public comment period, I want to thank each of our participants on behalf of our whole Board of Education. We appreciate your advocacy for your children. I also want to acknowledge the many public comments from many of our community members. We also appreciate your advocacy, whether you are writing in support of continuing remote learning or to come back to in-person learning. I want to assure each public commenter, regardless of the format in which you commented, whether you were here or whether you were by email, your concerns are heard by the Board of Education. As a reminder, our designee to public comment is our superintendent, and he will apprise the board accordingly with his responses.
Okay, and Board President Fitzgerald alluded to this, but for our members of the community who did submit public comment via email, all received messages have been posted in the public content section of board docs and are available for public's review. All the comments that were received for this were in regard to return to learn, and as you would expect, there's some in favor of remaining in e-learning and some in favor of returning to in-person. So again, all public comment emails have been received, and it looks like we have one last public comment sheet coming forward. So.
Yep. Okay, at this point then, I would like to call Robert Pat.
Good evening, everybody. A couple hours ago, I was coaching my daughter for Park District soccer, 3rd grade, and we just happened to kind of be part of the protest, as you say, or part of the support for opening our school. So she asked me to speak. So I don't like to speak. I'm a small business owner here. 3 beautiful kids. This is my young one, shy one, you know, bad eyesight like Dad and things like that. But I understand that everyone, you know, has different opinions. Some of you might have children, some of you might have grandchildren, who knows, I don't know. It's gotta be hard for you guys to decide what to do for thousands, 10,000 people, 1 million people, who knows? It's a lot of people to decide. I'd hate to be in your situation. It's really tough. But I do know, you know, as an IT guy, a computer guy, you know, we've grown attached to these computers. Everyone here has a computer, everyone here has a phone. And all we're doing right now is really teaching these kids right now to become Facebook employees or employees in front of a computer instead of the good old days where we can actually just talk and shake, go out to lunch with your buddies, you name it, draw. So, you know, as an IT guy for the last 20 years, unfortunately my children are part of the IT industry because I am. And I hate it, I really do hate it. It takes away from the person-on-person relationship. And it gets devastating. I mean, Zoom is not the answer. It really isn't. You know, our teachers are the answers. I'm in Naperville, been in Naperville, pay a lot of taxes, don't mind paying taxes for my, great schools. Heck, back in '89, I graduated from Bennett Academy, and I remember coming here with my friends from Naperville Central. They graduated in '89, and enjoyed the homecoming here and all the activities. And I just look at these kids. My kids are freshmen. They're just missing out on things. It's just insane. And they can go 50 minutes away to the borders and talk to other people who are not doing this. So, let's just turn aside our differences. I could use the word political, but I'm not. But, let's just think about the kids. And, 8-year-old, 13-year-old, I have a 14-year-old. Some of you might not have that. But, just these computers and technology is really destroying our youth. I mean, we're pre-programming them to become employees of the computer. It's insane. So as an IT guy, you guys got to rethink this, because it's just, 24 hours ago, I would have never been here. So she drives me every day, and I love her, and that's why I'm speaking for you, okay? Okay? I love you, okay?
On behalf of the whole board, thank you for coming, Robert, and thank you to your daughter as well. Okay, I don't have any more public comment slips, and so that will conclude our public comment period. All right, at this point, we will move to our agenda. Listed in board docs are our monthly reports, treasury, investments, insurance, and budget. Does any member of the board have questions about any of our monthly reports? Okay. All right, so we will move to our action by consent. I will entertain a motion for the consent agenda.
Okay. I had the responsibility and privilege to work on the bills and claims for this month. And thank you to Tracy and to Mike Francis, Tracy LaFlemme and Mike Francis for the time you guys spent walking me through all of the different pieces. And so with that, I will make a motion. I move approval of warrant number 1028239 through warrant number 1028769, totaling $28,725,259.71 for the period of August 18th, 2020 to September 21st, 2020. And items 7.01, 7.02, 7.03, and 7.04 on the consent agenda.
Okay.
Second.
A motion and a second are heard. Please call the roll, Mrs. Patton.
Wanke? Aye. Yangroor?
Aye.
Gerke?
Aye.
Kush?
Aye.
Leong?
Aye.
Kosminski?
Aye.
Fitzgerald?
Aye. Okay, the motion passes. So we will move on in our agenda to our communications, and we welcome that for the first time this school year, our student ambassadors. So I want to say thank you for coming, and if you wouldn't mind, when you first introduce yourself, tell us a little tiny bit about yourself, and then go ahead and do your report. So who would like to go first? William?
Hey everyone, I'm William Ma. Just a little bit about me. I'm a senior at Naperville Central High School. At NCHS, I'm involved in the debate team as well as DECA, which is a business club. As for me, I'm passionate about the importance of debate and discourse, as well as teen mental health in general. So I just want to start off by giving a little bit of a summary of what the perspective of a student at the high school level has been during e-learning specifically. So there's actually been a surprisingly large amount of variation between the teachers and classes as far as I've seen. So some of our classes have been almost completely on Zoom during the entirety of the period, whereas some others have been mostly asynchronous learning with only a little bit of time spent on Zoom for attendance, and the majority of my classes fall somewhere in between that range. And It also differs as well in terms of the workload and sort of the amount of work that we have to do outside of class. So some of my teachers have assigned homework in addition to the classwork during asynchronous learning. Some of our teachers just have us do our homework during asynchronous learning, so that sort of differs as well. And it most likely differs a little bit by grade as well, since I'm a senior. As for what student thoughts have been as to how online learning has gone, definitely I can say, and most of the people that I've talked to, most of my friends and other students sort of agree that Zoom learning at the high school level has gone better than expected for like interacting with peers and teachers, and the structure definitely helps, at least compared to in the spring when it was sort of a surprise and a little less organized. So this current system feels a lot more like actual school than it did in the spring. As for cons, as expected, with online learning, there's obviously less social interaction and it feels a little less personal than actual school. And a lot of the times sitting in front of a screen can be tiring as well. But overall, there's definitely a huge positive difference between what we're experiencing right now at the high school level compared to what it was like in the spring. As for updates for Naperville Central High School, there's been a lot of events and notable things that I felt like the board might be interested in hearing. So, for example, parent-teacher conference signups have begun, and those will be happening in early October. SAT testing for seniors is going to happen this Wednesday, and Naperville Central High School already successfully hosted an optional SAT testing date on August 29th at the building. Furthermore, as Mr. Bridges already mentioned, National Merit Scholar semifinalists were announced. My school, Naperville Central High School, had 25 students. The first late start date was last Monday, and announcements have been during third period on Monday as well. And in addition to that, the week before last week was material pickup for all grade levels at Central. So they had a drive-through and picked up materials such as textbooks. And then as for sports and clubs, right now there are 6 fall sports going on at Central. Girls tennis, girls swim, boys and girls cross country, as well as boys and girls golf. And then for clubs, it's a little bit of a mixed bag. So far, clubs are going to be online. Some of them have already started, such as Debate, National Honor Society. Some of them have not yet begun, but are planning to, and then some of them are not planning to operate this year. And that's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you, William, for sharing your experiences with e-learning as well as your report. Welcome, Shay.
Hey, I'm Shay Doshi. I am a senior at Naperville North High School. I am on the gymnastics team at my school, and I guess my feedback is similar to William's. It's twofold. Logistically, so e-learning has been going really well. There's been significant improvements since last spring. The Zoom software has been working really well. There aren't really many issues with students not being able to connect or get on or do their assignments or anything. And then the other side of the feedback I would give is the students and teachers emotions and stuff. And so I think definitely we have seen some significant improvement from last year as well, and it's not what we could expect if we were in person, but I think every teacher has done a phenomenal job, and they've been trained very well to deal with online learning. And moving forward, I hope that that continues. And yeah, overall, I'd say that our experience has been pretty solid. So yeah.
And did you want to give a report about Naperville North?
Sure. We have a lot of similar events as Williams School coming up. All our sports are the same, and clubs that are starting up are the same. We actually have a Mr. NNHS event next week, in a couple weeks maybe, and we're hosting it outside. We do it annually, usually in the auditorium, but this year it will be outside on the field, so that's going to be pretty exciting too.
Wonderful. Thank you for that report, and thank you for sharing your perspective as well. All right, we'll move then to written communications Listed in board docs are the Freedom of Information Act requests for your review. We will go on then to item 8.03, Superintendent Staff School Report.
Thank you. And our first report this evening will be presented by Executive Director of Diversity and Inclusion, Dr. Rakita Leeks. Dr. Leeks is going to provide an update to the Board of Education and the community on our work in regard to equity, diversity, and inclusion, including an update on just our work moving forward, as well as some of the events that we have worked on in the past year. Dr. Leeks.
Thank you. Good evening, members of the board, Superintendent Bridges, colleagues, and members of the community. My name is Dr. Rakita Leeks. I am the Executive Director of Diversity and Inclusion, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you tonight and share the progress that we have made to support and expand our gap closing efforts to identify and address systemic inequities, to confront acts of bias and racism, and create a more equitable and inclusive environment for District 203 staff, students, and families. Before I go on, I would like to thank members of Cabinet for their collaboration. Thanks to the Diversity Advisory Committee, which is comprised of 2 representatives from each school, including a staff person and a parent or caregiver, for their constructive and candid input and feedback. The Diversity Advisory Committee met 4 times in the 2019-20 school year, including once virtually, and were critical in helping me identify community and professional learning opportunities needed. And special thanks to the staff, families, current and former students, and community leaders who advocated for Black, Latinx, Asian, English learners, LGBTQ+, and other underrepresented and underserved populations in the district. Our hardworking leaders, educators, and staff are working tirelessly to help us to live up to our full potential and effectively serving the needs of all students. In the 2018-2019 school year, with input from the district leadership team, building leaders, and the Diversity Advisory Committee, we identified 4 diversity and inclusion priority areas, including examine systemic inequities, district-wide implicit bias training, a curriculum review, and to examine recruitment and hiring practices. In order to advance this work, we also identified strategic partnerships like Indiana University's Midwest and Plains Equity Assistance Center and Corwin's Deep Equity Program to provide additional expertise and to build our capacity to achieve our desired outcomes. Our first priority area is examining systemic inequities. Thanks to the Board of Education for approving our partnership with Corwin's Deep Equity Program and their team to help us to build our capacity to thoroughly examine our schools and the district as a whole through an equity lens. Each school building, including Connections, as well as the district office, has an equity team which is comprised of 6 to 10 leaders, certified and non-certified staff that have a diverse demographic makeup. In November 2019, our Deep Equity teams began the Deep Equity's comprehensive and systemic professional learning process, which was aimed at producing the deep personal, professional, and organizational transformations that are needed to create equitable places of learning for all students. This past spring, shelter-in-place orders required us to cancel the sessions that were planned in April 2020. As a result, we revised the Deep Equity Professional Learning Plan to include makeup dates from the spring, as well as the remaining session dates for the 2021 school year. All fall 2020 sessions will be virtual. Our second priority area is the district-wide implicit bias training. Since June 2019, over 800 Naperville 203 staff have participated in one of our in-person implicit bias trainings. Implicit bias trainings demonstrate how people make and sometimes act upon snap judgments based on the other person's identity group without any conscious intention. Implicit bias often operates subconsciously. Generally, we do not even realize that we're being biased. However, unconscious decisions Unconsciously biased decisions made by educators can affect the students' life trajectories regardless of intent. In addition to the in-person training sessions that we have offered, we also require all staff to complete an online learning module titled Cultural Competency and Racial Bias through our Human Resources Training Platform, Global Compliance Network, which is also known as GCN. This satisfies Illinois House Bill 3869, which states that implicit bias training and that all school boards shall require in-service training for school personnel to include training to develop cultural competency, including understanding and reducing implicit racial bias. During the 2019-20 school year, I also led implicit bias trainings for the general 203 community, including our Focus 203 sessions and other community meetings. This spring, we intend to continue our in-person implicit bias trainings for additional employee groups, including all certified staff. If we are unable to offer in-person trainings, then we will offer live trainings virtually. Our third priority area is a curriculum review. In the spring of 2019, with approval from the Board of Education, I led the development of a memorandum of understanding with the Great Lakes Equity Assistance Center. In the fall of 2019, we began our 2-year partnership with the center. We collaboratively developed 2 goals that began our 2-year partnership with them. And those 2 goals frame our professional development and work with the Midwestern Plains Equity Assistance Center, which is the Great Lakes region that supports districts specifically in Illinois. Jane Willard, Jenny Donatelli, and I participate in monthly calls and have planned professional learning sessions that include school leaders, learning services staff, learning support coaches, learning commons directors, and student services coordinators. As we work with curriculum teams, we embed this learning into our curriculum development to ensure that the curriculum we create for students is done through a lens of equity. Our fourth priority area is to examine recruitment and hiring practices to build a more diverse workforce. I want to use this opportunity to highlight and celebrate the district's improved diversity hiring outcomes as a result of targeted trainings and recruitment strategies. Although there is still much work to be done, as of August 20th, 2020, the current school year's new educator class of hires is progressing towards being more representative of our student body. In this instance, educator is defined as a certified staff person, including teachers, social workers, counselors, etc. We made the biggest improvement in hiring educators who identify as Hispanic or Latinx. Additionally, part of what makes this class of new educators diverse are the things that you don't see in the numbers because we don't track it, like things like teachers who speak multiple languages or wear clothing that make their religion known. Our HR department, as well as our school leaders' hard work in this effort paid off tremendously. Next, I want to introduce the Board of Education to the district's comprehensive equity plan. Naperville 203 is widely recognized as a top-performing, well-resourced unit school district in Illinois. We set high standards and expectations for our students and have consistently ranked highly on state and national performance assessments. Despite all of our high academic achievement patterns, we are aware of the persistent racial, ethnic, and other economic-related disparities and inequities in our students' learning and comprehensive school experiences. As evident by the Board of Education's equity resolution, we know that we must focus on educational equity to ensure that every student has access to exemplary learning opportunities with the support they need to be self-directed learners, collaborative workers, complex thinkers, quality producers, and community contributors. We will achieve educational equity when educational policies, practices, interactions, and resources are representative of, constructed by, and responsive to all people, so that each individual has access to meaningfully participate in and has positive outcomes from high-quality learning experiences, regardless of individual characteristics or group memberships. Our district student demographics has shifted significantly. In our district, academic achievement gaps exist between student groups such as race, ethnicity, income, and English proficiency. On standardized exams such as the Illinois Assessment of Readiness, or the IAR, in English Language Arts and in math, as well as the SAT examinations. Closing these gaps is a major priority for our district and a primary purpose for developing this comprehensive equity plan. Dr. Christine Igo, Assistant Superintendent of Student Services, Jane Willard, Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction, and I created the initial draft of the Naperville 203's Comprehensive Equity Plan. To ensure diverse voices and perspectives were reflected, the following individuals and groups were reviewed and provided key input in the current draft of the Comprehensive Equity Plan to create the conditions for a truly equitable and inclusive learning environment where all students thrive to their fullest potential. And those groups include the Board of Education now, but also Naperville 203's Cabinet Leadership Team, our district leadership team, which includes principals, high school APs, and district senior leadership, as well as Naperville 203's District Diversity Advisory Committee and the Midwestern Plains Equity Assistance Center. In the coming months, we will finalize and make our equity plan available to the public. We know that Naperville 203 cannot address these issues alone. We rely on our partnerships and we rely on our community, including students, staff, families, and the larger 203 community. We continue to work closely with external community organizations and networks, including but not limited to the ones listed on this slide, to better support diverse groups in our district. We would like our community's help in identifying additional organizations that are not listed as well. So thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak here. That concludes my presentation, and I welcome any questions from the board.
Thank you so much, Dr. Leaks. This is incredibly exciting to see the work and the results. And this is something the board has been very, very committed to, as was seen through the board's resolution that was passed earlier this summer. I will take questions from each board member. Oh, Joe. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. I'm really delighted to be on the Diversity Advisory Committee this year. We had a really good meeting last Monday, and I'm impressed by the progress that have been made in these DEI initiatives. Really excited by the diversity of the new educator group. This is a metric that shows that our hiring and recruiting practices that have been developed are working. We also had a really good discussion of the equity plan, and it aligns well with the board's equity resolution from June. And one thing I will point out from that is, finding those indicators of success, I think, are really important. We discussed that in the committee last Monday. So I would just encourage you to continue defining some of those, especially with the community engagement. But I'm really excited by the plan and the potential for these initiatives.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. Janet?
Thank you, Dr. Leaks, for the presentation. I think it's worth noting, we didn't really go through it in detail, but there is a very detailed equity plan that's part of this agenda. I wonder, could you just give us a sense for what the timeline is for putting the plan, the detailed plan, to work?
Yeah, just for a point of clarification, and then I'll ask you to speak to it. It is still in draft form, so I want to ensure that there are updates that will still need to be done. So, Dr. Leaks.
Yes, we collected some additional feedback from some of the stakeholder groups that I mentioned just this past week, and even got some additional feedback today. So we will be looking through those and making some adjustments this week. And then I'll be sharing that with my colleagues. Our hope is by the end of October, we'll have it published on our website for the public to view.
At that point, is it supposed to be a final draft, or are you looking
As a
for-
final draft.
Okay.
Charles.
Dr. Leeks, thanks for your report. Really appreciate it, and thank you for all the work that you and the others in the administration have been working towards this. As Kristen mentioned, this is something that has been near and dear to the board, so really appreciate all the effort, energy, and progress that's been made here. One question I do have around, it was great to see the hiring outcomes in terms of how it's better reflecting the current student demographics. My question is around retention metrics. It's great to make sure that we're bringing people in. Can you speak a little bit to some of the efforts underway to ensure that we're retaining the employees that we do have that fall into these different categories?
Thank you. I did receive your note about that, and so we will be adding a retention metric explicitly to the plan. Some of the strategies that we've currently implemented to ensure that we are retaining the staff that we have include, we just initiated an employee resource group, which is sort of like an affinity group for certain employee workforce populations that we have, and providing a space and an opportunity for them to meet and to network, but also to leverage that opportunity of having them together to expand our diversity and inclusion initiatives, as well as get additional feedback from those groups to enhance the work that we're already doing. And involving people in that process makes them feel more connected to the community and more likely to stay. And so we are just now rolling that out with staff who identify as Black African American, with opportunities to expand that to other community groups as well.
Thank you.
Paul.
Hi. My understanding is you're going through a review of our policies. I've served about 3.5 years, and I've approved quite a few new policies as well as quite a few revisions and changes. I was wondering if you found any policies in your review that you might deem racist and that you'd want to have revised immediately.
We have not completed a review of our policies. The part of the work that we're doing with Corwin's Deep Equity is to build our capacity to be able to identify those things and to comb through that. Unfortunately, because of the shelter-in-place orders, we had to suspend some of that learning this past spring, so we'll be resuming that actually next week. We'll start to resume that and pick up where we left off at. So with that, I don't currently at this time have any specific policies that I can mention. However, I have received some feedback from the community generally about some of our student conduct policies and not being as explicit when it comes to how we respond to acts of racism when it comes to student interactions. So that's been the feedback that I've received from the community.
Thank you. Could I ask another few questions?
Yes.
I'm thrilled with your progress on the hiring. And what did you do differently that allowed you to accomplish so much in such a short time, where in previous years we failed to do so?
Well, it wasn't me personally. I would like to take credit, but it wasn't me personally. I collaborated with the HR team, and they had been really great and really thinking about how we can expand our recruitment and outreach efforts. We started to engage with historically Black colleges and universities to build relationships with those institutions, and whenever possible to attend some of their recruitment events and let them know that Naperville is a great place to work. We also started to look at Hispanic serving institution as well with those same strategies in mind. Another thing that we did was that we had staff who represented diverse groups join our HR team on those recruitment trips, so that people can see that, again, Naperville is already a very diverse place, and this will be a very welcoming place for all community groups to be employed with us. And so, and then we also made sure that our the names of the people that we collected on those at those events were made available to our hiring managers, so they had access and expanded access of applicants to consider for their positions.
Thank you. I'm told that you are working on or working with our counselors and teachers to ensure fair and equitable practices regarding letters of recommendation submitted to colleges from District 203. Can you share any of this work and how it's going and what you project and how we can look forward to perhaps more information in the future?
Mm-hmm. So I recently became aware of that as a potential area of concern based on the Harvard University's Dean of Students who made comments about Asian American students receiving recommendations that were not as strong as, for example, their white peers who are applicants as well. And so after learning that information recently, I stated that that would be something that we will be adding to our review to ensure that our recommendation process is free of bias and discrimination, but we haven't started any of that as of yet.
So there are no current numbers we could review or audit in terms of what we've been doing in the past?
Not that I'm aware of. I don't know if Dr. Igo, you want to, the student services.
I would need to do a little bit of research into that, but I can certainly take some time to do that.
Thank you.
Okay. Christine.
Thanks for your report. I was very excited to see this on the agenda. As it's been stated before, we've all been very curious and very invested in the work that you're doing. I was, the whole draft document, the statement and all of our goals, as much as I love the whole document, the last piece was the one that really caught my eye. I appreciate that you're looking to incorporate many community members and people, advocates out in the community as we work on these initiatives. So thank you for reaching out beyond just our buildings within the district. Can you tell me or tell us, has any of the work that you've done so far, and I know it's very early, started to play or helped play a role while we're in this e-learning phase, like to not exacerbate any inequities? Have you been able to work with one or two or any outside groups to kind of help us through this time?
So yes, some family organizations I've worked with directly to ensure that their students who are already vulnerable student populations do not suffer significant learning loss or due to challenges that they might have in the availability of having an adult right beside them during the e-learning. So many of these students are doing the e-learning on their own, and their families have concerned about whether or not they would be able to keep up and maintain the rigor that would be needed for them to be successful. So I've partnered with some of those, well, one in particular family organization to identify some tutoring organizations to support those students in their learning, as well as to develop other opportunities for them to collaborate and to come together in very, very small groups so that they can get that additional support and learning where needed.
Great, thank you. Okay, Donna.
Thank you, Dr. Leeks, for your report and for the thoroughness of it. You referred to curriculum reviews. Can you give us a little bit more of what that looks like and how much is changing and when?
Mm-hmm. So the curriculum review process right now is more about us building our capacity to be able to, again, look at our curriculum through a critical equity lens. So the first step is for us to be able to actually do that. So we have to build our capacity in that regard. So we've been going through a lot of professional learning. And we've had one set of learning opportunities, and we have several others that are scheduled for this year as well. By the end of that learning experience, then we will have the tools that we need to actually to do what one might consider more of an audit, to review to do more of an audit to review our curriculum. So that's something that will be coming towards the end of our partnership, for example, with the Great Lakes Equity Assistance Center.
Okay, and then the other question that I had is more for like our next report or when we post this, on the website. I love the indicators of success that we have that we're looking at by 2023, but I'd like to also see some baseline data to better understand the metrics of those goals. So that's not something, that I want you to answer now, obviously, but when we get to the point where we're publishing that, just so that we can see where we're at and where we're headed, so that we have a measurable goal.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I just want to commend you for your work. It was so heartening to see the equity plan, but it was also so heartening to see the response of the Diversity Advisory Committee. This has been, as I said, a huge priority for the board and a huge priority for our community. And so seeing some of the initial changes that are coming through as a result of our hard work is exciting. And we know we have so much more to do, but it is rewarding to see that we're beginning to make some progress. I have a couple questions. I had sent them ahead, but I just think it's important for our community to review. So can you just expand a little bit more on some of the things that are in the comprehensive equity plan with regard to increasing student voices? So the systematic retrieval of their voice, our efforts to facilitate peer-to-peer relationships for them that are crossing cultural and race boundaries. Some of the plans, some of the areas where you're specifically looking at how we're going to be making progress with students and including them in this whole equity journey.
So some of the things that we are considering is to offer an annual training for our students to participate in, our 6 to 12 grade students to participate in, that will help them have discussions, a constructive dialogue about these topics, topics around diversity, equity, and inclusion, of course, in a constructive way, and also to work on helping them to really facilitate and build a sense of community amongst each other. And so that, and also to work through like conflict management, as well as how to respond to if they hear any acts of bias or microaggressions, to be able to recognize what those things are, and then how to appropriately respond to them in support of their peers and to self-advocate as well.
Thank you. That's wonderful. I am so excited about that work. And I know our students who have been so active in support of equity and condemning racism all summer, I know that many of them are so passionate and really want to be engaged and involved. And so I'm excited to see the areas where we're really going to be working with students. My second area was with regard to family engagement. That was the committee that Joe and I sat on in the Diversity Advisory Review. And there was quite a bit of dialogue about how we can measure the family engagement and just sort of really ensuring that we have those, that goal is drafted well and that we have those appropriate areas where we talk about really facilitating that sense of belongingness with families as well as students. So can you just speak to kind of the thoughts in terms of how we can measure that?
So one of the things that we discussed as a cabinet leadership team was to identify new ways to get that feedback directly from our families potentially through a survey. Right now, we don't currently have a survey that explicitly asks about feelings of connectedness to the school community, or anything else that's explicitly about diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we would need to either create a survey or identify a company that has an existing survey that would be able to help us to generate that information. And then most importantly, to be able to disaggregate that information by how those families identify, so that we'll know better about how each kind of demographic group in a district feels when it comes to connectedness to the school community.
Wonderful. I think that was an area of a lot of passion and a lot of involvement from our committee, and so I'm thrilled to hear that there's been some dialogue about that, and I'll look forward to being able to measure that so that we can really make sure that we're making good on that part of our commitment. So thank you again for your hard work. Any other questions from the board? Okay. All right, then we will move on. Our next part of the agenda is our Return to Learn update.
Okay, Rich, if we'll just pull up the slides here and just leave it on the title slide here for a minute. I want to begin by thanking our parents, our caregivers, our family members, and those of you that are here this evening who spoke to the Board of Education. Please know that the board and I do value your comments and what you shared with us this evening. I want to thank you for your voice. I want to thank you for your advocacy for your children and for your families. It's not an easy time for any of us. It's not an easy time for any of you. I understand that. I respect that. I hear you. I'm especially empathetic to those of you with the youngest students in our district and those that have unique needs that need to be served. I appreciate your comments. I hear your comments. As I think about decisions regarding our school year, I want you to, this is not an ask for, sympathy from you. This is an understanding of, I'm a parent also. My family's have five kids, 4 who have gone through our schools, 1 who's currently a senior. We had 1 who was a graduate last year. And so for us, for me, it is a personal thing. And I certainly, you can't, with seniors last year, a senior this year, this personally impacts me in my house as well. So I hear you and I understand, and it remains my commitment to get our students back to in-school learning as soon as we can do so within the parameters that are put in place for us. So there's been a lot of conversation about, politics, sides, and metrics being used to make decisions. I can assure you that my decision-making is in alignment with the Illinois State Board of Education, Illinois Department of Public Health, and DuPage County Health Department, with whom I speak to frequently. I'll go on to the next slide. What I'm going to do this evening is provide an update to the Board of Education. Rich, next slide, please. Just again, an update to the board and to the community on our plans for reopening of the 2020-2021 school year. Next slide. Our goals, just as a reminder, is to develop and implement a plan that can be flexible and responsive to changing conditions that returns us to a full in-person instruction. But we must do so in a way that ensures the safety and security of our learning environment, our workspace conditions for our staff and our students. Our guiding principles, again, for your reminder, our plans need to align across levels since many families have students in different buildings and at different levels across the district. All plans need to include academic and social emotional needs and promote equity for all students. The Illinois State Board of Education has also reinstated that all schools ensure students engage in 5 hours instruction and/or learning each day. And again, for a review, this is an overview of our framework. Our framework for our return to learn is intended to be flexible and responsive to the changing conditions. And as you're aware, we currently are in stage 1 of our plan, e-learning. One of the biggest outcomes for stage 1 was for staff to learn and implement the new health and safety guidelines. District administrators partnered with school principals and site directors to conduct formal walkthroughs at each of our buildings to assess the implementation of these standards. Sites have proper signage, show compliance with face covering, and appropriately mark traffic patterns to ensure the health and safety of individuals within our buildings. Walkthrough protocols will be regularly conducted to ensure adherence to guidelines and to determine if adjustments are needed. Since September 1, our first day of school, students have been actively engaged in e-learning, and high-priority students have begun to come in for in-person learning. Some students with IEPs have been participating in small group instruction, learning health and safety guidelines, and gaining skills to independently participate in e-learning. There has been positive feedback from families, students, and staff on the many changes made to improve the online learning experience for our students, especially compared to last spring. Our youngest learners have done a good job of building independence within the online environment, but barriers still exist. Feedback from many families, teachers, and administrators indicate that actively engaging in 2.5 hours of live online daily instruction is emotionally taxing on students at this age level. Additionally, teachers are having difficulty gathering authentic assessment data to inform their small group instruction. The administration is using this feedback as we begin our transition to stage 2. In order to provide a healthy and safe learning environment, we need to carefully monitor the health metrics within our county, our ability to maintain a sufficient inventory of necessary personal protective equipment, and to ensure that we have the necessary substitutes to support staff absences due to COVID-related illness and required isolation or quarantine guidelines. Recently, the DuPage County Health Department released supplementary guidance that identifies the community transmission level based upon several health metrics. Those health metrics, which we use as part of our review in determining when to progress from certain stages, include the Illinois Department of Public Health's alert level for our region, weekly count cases, increases in our weekly county overall case numbers over 2 consecutive weeks, increases in weekly county youth cases for 2 consecutive weeks, and the neighboring counties level on the Illinois Department of Public Health's alert levels. DuPage County, as has been mentioned, is currently considered to be at risk for moderate community transmission. Additionally, last week, the CDC released indicators and thresholds of risk for transmission to support schools in making informed decisions about when and how to engage in in-person learning. We are working through reviewing those documents and determining how they will support the evaluation and decision-making for moving between the stages in our Return to Learn plan. These documents will outline how the level of community transmission directly impacts the stage of the plan, as well as the needed PPE, and how we will determine if we have enough staff to support in-person learning. Stage 2 of the Return to Learn plan builds off of our full e-learning model, and it has been updated. We will begin to expand the number of students coming into the buildings for small group or individual learning. As students become more comfortable within our buildings, the NWEA MAP growth reading and mathematics assessments will be administered to K-8 students and to select high school students. High school seniors will be administered the SAT with essay on September 23rd, and juniors will be administered the PSAT and MSQT on October 24th. Based on informal feedback from our staff and families, we have continued to prepare for consistent in-person instruction for our early childhood and elementary students. Stage 2 planning will prioritize early childhood through 2nd grade students for in-person learning as early as mid-October, with 3rd through 5th graders phasing in the following weeks. Starting out with smaller groups of students will help to assess our processes and procedures as we increase the number of students in the buildings during this phase. E-learning continues for students who are unable to attend in-person learning. Students in grades 6 through 12 will continue to participate in e-learning through an online environment with their set schedules, while staff will begin in-person learning experiences for priority groups of students. Additionally, students will be able to access school buildings should they need a quiet place to work or need a stable internet connection. Extracurricular activities will continue in person or virtually as guidance allows. However, we do need to hear from our community in order to finalize our plans for stage 2 and beyond. District and building leadership are actively preparing for stage 2. Below are the ongoing actions we are taking to ensure that our plan meets the needs of our students. Plan to distribute a parent-guardian survey after the board meeting this evening for feedback regarding our Stage 1 implementation and to gather input for the Stage 2. We'll revise our metrics on evaluating how to move between stages based on the new CDC and DuPage County Health Department guidance. Continue to monitor the revised health metrics, our PPE inventory, and available substitutes to support daily absences. Develop and implement a phased-in plan that provides consistent in-person instruction beginning with early childhood through second grade students and then expanding to third through fifth grade. We'll develop and implement a phased-in plan that provides consistent in-person instruction for students with IEPs served in our specialized classroom. Conduct ongoing review and adjustment of learning plans for students with IEPs. 6 through 12 grade administrators and educators will be reviewing data to determine priority students who will need in-person instruction. 6 through 12 administrators and educators will create a procedure for students to attend in-person learning for special services, labs, and performance-based classes and targeted instruction, while also participating in e-learning. We're developing a calendar for NWEA MAP growth in third grade COGAD administration. We will evaluate and select live streaming options for real-time instruction to occur simultaneously for those who wish to remain home, and develop and communicate to all stakeholders plans for the procedures for bringing in students for in-person instruction. So we currently are on track on our 4-stage program with the intent of transitioning to stage 2 with a prioritization on EC through second grade, and then third through fifth grade students, as well as priority groups in grades 6 through 12 beginning in mid-October. This time, my team will take questions from the Board of Education.
Okay, so I also want to thank our audience members for staying. I'm sorry that not all of the speakers were able to stay all the way through. But as Dan has said, we understand how frustrating and difficult this has been for many families, particularly those with our youngest learners. And we have heard you and we hear your passion. And we know that there are many others in our community who are reaching out to us, who are concerned about health, and that are concerned that they can't come back to learn, and we understand and hear their concerns, and they have all been heard by the board. So at this point, we want to respond to the presentation, ask some of the questions from our community members. And so I'll start with the individual board members with your questions. Paul.
Will there be any form of appeal process for parents or students who you do not classify as priority?
At the grade 6 through 12 levels?
At any levels you choose to share about.
Okay, so again, in grades early childhood through fifth grade, we are prioritizing a learn that will allow students who are ready to return with maintaining online instruction for those who choose not to. 6th through 12th grade, right now, no, we do not plan an appeal process. We'll be identifying students based on academic needs after assessment, as well as performance-based classes, labs, or those that would benefit most from in-person instruction. Ms. Willard or Dr. Igo has anything to add to that?
Joe.
Thank you for the update. It's good to see that the early childhood through 2 and the rest of the elementary will be prioritized in this. Do you expect this return to be in a hybrid mode? And if not, is there actually room for appropriate distancing if you're thinking of bringing everybody back?
Yes, we're currently looking at what the hybrid model would look like. It might not be what we presented at the July meeting, but we're definitely looking at how do we bring students in consistently and so that they're in person for, especially for the early elementary, for those that literacy and math block. And so we just have to think about how we're going to get them there and what that day looks like. We're currently working with educators. We brought some educators in this week, or last week, some of our early childhood through second grade educators to think through what does that look like. We have a pretty good plan. We just need to finalize some of the details.
It will partially be informed by results from the survey that we send out this evening that we're going to ask parents to complete by Friday and complete for every child that you have based on level. And then that'll help us determine what that schedule will look like depending on the numbers of students who are ready to return.
Janet.
Can you share some of the things that we've learned in stage 1 that are informing how we're managing our practices around how we return in subsequent stages, like stage 2, 3?
Okay, I think I understand your question. I may ask for a little bit of a clarification. We have definitely gotten some feedback from stakeholders as parents. We've gotten feedback from our teachers of what is working in this online environment and what are those things that actually need more in person in order to connect for students. So we'll use that to decide, do we increase the in-person? What does the in-person look like? And that will vary by level. Very much we look at the developmentally appropriateness of the age of the students to say how are they responding and what is the need for in-person and increased in-person as we move forward.
Yeah, as an example, just some of my comments earlier in regard to especially our EC through second grade students. Feedback that we've heard from our teachers, our parents, and administrator regarding just the amount of time that we're asking for those EC through to second grade students to be in that virtual environment has helped us say those are the students we need to prioritize as we shift into stage 2 and look at getting them back on a more consistent in-person schedule.
Can I go ahead and take the 3 questions? Okay,
yes.
Could you tell us a little bit about how many students have we brought back so far in the past 3 weeks?
Those decisions are made individually based on IEP teams, so I don't have an exact number for you, but I know that we have had students in almost every building, beginning with the second week of school, and they're bringing 2 to 3 students in at a time. So that, just to give you some idea of how that looks, I would say we've had about probably different students in and out. Some have been in multiple times, probably 25 to 30.
Sorry, 25 to 30 total?
I believe that's a guess on my part. I don't have the actual numbers because those numbers change from week to week based upon the services that they're providing to kids.
And let's jump around a little. Last time, I asked about a COVID-19 dashboard. Can you maybe talk a little bit about what our thinking is these days on if and how we'll provide that kind of information?
Yeah, we're continuing to look into that. We've definitely decided, weighing both the pros and the cons to doing that. As we talked about, there are definitely some pros in terms of that transparency piece, helping people to know and understand where something falls within our community, how often we're seeing that. There are also some negatives to that in regards to the way the system is set up. It requires that people report those to us. So there isn't a system per se because of HIPAA laws where somebody reports to us specifically when there's a positive case. So it does require that students and staff and families are self-reporting that information. So our numbers wouldn't necessarily be accurate. They would only be that's what's been reported to us.
And so are we at the point? So are we at kind of just a still thinking about it point in terms of having a dashboard?
I think we're still continuing to understand how that might help us and where it could possibly help us. We have not quite decided yet what we need to do.
Still trying to work through the best way to ensure that if we publish a dashboard of that kind, that it provides relevant, useful information.
Charles.
Thank you. Again, thanks for the report. So first I'm going to start off with a point of clarification, which will count as one of my 3, so it's fine. So the plan now, in the stage 2 transition, you're prioritizing EC to 2 students, and then you'll phase in the 3 to 5 students. The phasing into the 3 to 5 is as a whole, not within 3 to 5. Like, you're not going to say, okay, certain 3 to 5 students will get to come back.
Correct.
Right, okay, so it's EC to 2, the first wave, and then that next
Correct.
wave, whenever that wave is available, will be all 3 to 5 students,
Correct.
not some or
That's
others.
correct.
Got it, okay. Unless they have a reason why they
Correct.
choose not to return, and the remote option will remain. Okay, thank you for that. The other question I had was similar to a question that Janet asked around, we have the Y in Champions program, and that has a fairly decent number of students in the building for those buildings that are housing those programs. What are some of the things that we've learned from that in terms of the interactions, the day-to-day, having people socially or interacting within the buildings that are informing some of the policies we'll be putting in place or procedures we'll put in place to ensure safety?
I'll ask Mr. Freund to address that, please.
Sure. Mr. Cush, we've certainly noticed that school looks different, that having students socially distanced while they're sitting in their classroom, and of course they're e-learning even while they're in the building in this case, looks different. And we have to make sure that we're bringing students back slowly to transition them back. We're seeing some of the emotional toll, and that's why we're prioritizing our EC2 students first. We know that with our staff, we want to be present when they return. We know that that slow return will help us focus on our youngest kids, and that's the reason for kind of staging 3 through 5 after we get our EC2 students back. The level of support that's being provided by our champions and YMCA staff is really just assistance. It'd be similar to what students are receiving while they're at home or at a grandparent's house or another child care provider. So we're not able to necessarily see a difference in terms of level of achievement and disaggregate it that way, because there's so many different variations in terms of where our students are at. But their level of socialization really isn't what school looked like, of course, back before COVID, as they're generally in a room like this with at least 6 feet between them at an individual station on their computers learning with their classroom teacher. I don't know if I've answered your question fully. Is that where you're going?
You have. If I could probe a little bit deeper on that. So as we're talking about this transition back to bringing the EC and 2 students, will it look more like that where the desks are separated, or will it be more like, I just want to make sure that we're managing an expectation that bringing students back into school while they'll be physically in the building, the level of interaction will not be necessarily what would just be
That's
what
correct.
we were used
We
to.
still will adhere to the Illinois Department of Public Health and Illinois State Board of Education guidelines regarding especially social distancing. Again, reminders, we're hearing this consistently from about every agency right now. Reminder to wear your masks, watch your distance, and wash your hands. Those will continue to be priorities in terms of how we bring them back, which is, again, why I ask that our members of our parents who received the survey link, first indication of whether you're ready to return, when it's ready, will help guide exactly how we structure those rooms.
Right, okay. And so thank you for that, because again, the reason for my questioning is to just make sure that we're setting an appropriate expectation that just because kids are back in the building, I think you said it very well, Chuck, it doesn't necessarily look like in-person school. And I just want to make sure that as we are bringing kids back, that there's that expectation that's appropriately set. So so the expectation of the community will understand that we'll have to look different even though they're physically in the building.
Yep, that's accurate.
Okay, thank you, that's helpful.
Done? Okay, Christine.
I need to just clarify, back to Janet's question. Dr. Igo, you said about 30 students. Do you mean per building? Or, I'm not sure.
Thank you for giving me, I was just sitting here thinking I had not answered that question very well. Yes, per building or on a daily basis. It's not necessarily per building, depending on elementary schools being smaller. But about 1% of our students are special ed students, or the students that are eligible for coming in, and all of them have a plan for coming in over the next 4 to 6 weeks.
Okay, and then just more clarification. Within stage 2 or the end of stage 2, we are hoping to have everyone EC through 5 back that wishes to choose, or that wishes to come back in person?
Yeah, again, in some form of in-person schedule, depending on the number of EC through 5th grade students who are returning. That's correct.
So it could be, again, I think to Charles' point about setting an expectation, it doesn't mean 5 days a week. It means some level of in-person instruction for those students and families that choose to
We
come
are
back.
looking at a number of scheduling options. It could be 5 days for half of a day. It could be some days of a week, more like a hybrid we showed earlier. It could be, again, depending on, at that level, how many of our families are ready to have their kids come back. It could be every day. And that's, again, why the feedback from our community is going to be so important.
Okay, no, I just think, thanks for that, Dan. I just want to make sure that I'm understanding it and that those expectations are in the community too, as we slowly get all of our kids back to where we know they should be. It's not going to be a super fast process. And I guess my comment behind our return to learn is I hope the community, I beg you to work with us and be patient. It's been exhausting for everybody to go through what we've gone through since March. And I know that we have the right people helping to develop these plans. And I asked, just as our staff and our administration, I'm just asking for the community to please be fully invested in this plan, because I think that's the only way the plan's going to work. And if we do this together, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be fast, but if we do it together, we're going to do it right and hopefully mitigate any other problems down the road as far as back and forth. So I appreciate the clarifications that you've answered. And that's it for now. Thanks, Kristen.
Okay. Donna?
First, I just want to start by saying that, you know, as a former teacher, nothing replaces in-person learning, and we all realize that. That's why we go to school the way we typically do, not a pandemic. I think a couple meetings ago, I made a comment that helped some people about how it's like a zero-depth pool, and we need to kind of gradual in. And so, to Christine's points, the gradual process takes some patience, and I know it's frustrating, but it takes some patience. So with that, I have a few questions. The metrics that we're looking at, it's my understanding from your report, Dan, that we're moving into stage 2 unless there's some other lockdown from the governor in DuPage County that would change that. Otherwise, we're shifting that way like mid-October-ish. Is that correct?
Currently, based on the metrics that we are reviewing, that I referenced earlier, yes, we are on trend to maintain our movement toward stage 2. I want to remind the community and the board that depending on whatever the metrics are, you know, for example, 2 weeks ago, DuPage County was, moved to a warning level by the Illinois Department of Public Health. That could impact our metrics. And if we don't hit enough of the metrics, the county health department could recommend for districts to go fully in person. So yes, based on the current metrics and where we currently stand, we are on track to transition to stage 2.
Okay. So similar to like when we have I'm understanding that there's a lot of moving parts. So when people are looking for what exact metrics you're looking at, it's all of those metrics together. So it's similar to almost like a snow day. Not that I want to compare this to that, but I'm just saying that there's a lot that goes into that decision with all your discussions with all of those departments, correct?
Yep.
Okay. What changes are being made in the physical environments of the classrooms and within the buildings to prepare for our students to come in?
That's something that's been happening all through the summer. All of our building leaders walked their buildings, looking at the guidelines that we had in place to say what rooms, and they went down to every single room in their building. How many students can we put in each space following the guidelines? We made mock classrooms to look at how the desks would be moved. And so they each have a plan. That plan has been in place, and they walked those buildings this summer. Like Dan said earlier, we also have done those audits where we've walked with the building leaders to make sure the signage is in place, to make sure that the one-way halls are in place, that staff are adhering to, they are 6 feet away, even when they're eating lunch. that they're always wearing a mask. So that's something that we have been put in place from the summer to make plans.
So as a follow-up to that, it's taken this first stage for the teachers and the staff to kind of figure that out before that they could implement it in with the students.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
I think it's important too to know, certainly all of our desks are far apart and they're 6 feet apart and those are in place. But as kids walk in and staff walk in, there's hygiene stations right as they walk in. So they're able to sanitize their hands as they're walking in because that's such an important piece. We've also gone down to the detail of what are the supplies that we have, making sure kids have their own supplies. What do we need to have more of? What are we going to share if we're going to share them, if we have to share them? How are we then going to sanitize and move them kind of through that process? So all of that has been taken into consideration, and that was also a big piece for teachers too, as they're thinking through. We spend a lot of time, especially with the little guys, trying to teach them to share, and so they needed some opportunities to think about all those things that we have that we aren't going to share anymore. How are we going to move those things forward?
Okay, so you've touched on some of my next question, but I'm going to ask
sorry.
it because there might be more that you can share that will help clarify things for us. Can you review what in-person instruction is going to look like when we return? Because I know it's going to be very different. My understanding from working closely with some of the extracurricular students in the high school is that it will not look normal to anyone. So can you give us a little bit of what that looks like?
I think what that's going to, I know what's going to look like is our students are not going to be clustered in cooperative groups as they were in the past. Their desks are going to be 6 feet apart from each other. They, like Dr. Igo just said, they will have their own supplies and materials. When we think about math manipulatives, let's say for our little guys, we're in the process of ordering individual supplies so that they have their own kits. What does it look like for guided reading? If our teachers pulled a guided reading group, we can't all go down to the kidney table in the back and sit. We really have to think about what does that small group instruction look like. And so students will have their own space. If we go outside, students will have an outside break, but they would have to have their own space. So it's really going to be getting, and that's one reason why we want to phase in to really start with our youngest, our 5-year-olds who have never even been in our buildings. They, have to get acclimated to the building space and then the different way in which they will conduct themselves in the space. We come for a reading, a read aloud. Do we come to the carpet on a certain square? So there's lots of logistics that have been already discussed that we just have to make sure that everyone adheres to and that implements those safety procedures.
Okay, so this is a follow-up to that, and then I'll skip my third question because I had a couple of follow-ups, I'm sorry. So a follow-up to that is, as a previous teacher who really valued that cooperative learning, that collaborative work together, to find another way to do that, I'm going to almost have to do that in like Zoom rooms or something so that they can collaborate. Like even when we're in person, the asynchronous part might be where I'm putting them. That's where they're going to get their collaborative time or like, how am I going to get that into my, I know that that's so important, and I know maybe that's a detail beyond what we need to know, but I think parents need to know because I think it's an important part of our learning, working together and being able to problem solve together, and I just can't envision math without that. So
that's something that I think sometimes gets underestimated, where we think, are we creating one plan? When we create a plan for in-person, we're creating multiple plans for what will work. And so it isn't just us building a A-B schedule. We'll build an A-B schedule. We have to build an AM-PM schedule. We have to build all these different types of schedules with teacher input to decide what is the best in-person instruction and then what does asynchronous look like. So we can be ready to implement one of 3 plans because of what is going to be best for the students. And that does require us to talk to our teachers that have lived this online, because they now have a better idea of what is best online versus what are those things they absolutely cannot do in an online environment that they need to do in person. So they really have a lot of ideas because of what we've experienced and because we've phased in.
thank you so much, because all that detail fills in the gaps for us. Thank you.
Okay, I see your hand, Paul, but I'm going to go ahead and do my questions first, and then we'll keep going on our rounds, okay? So I just want to be clear that I have it correct. We're talking about starting right after parent-teacher conferences for EC through 2, and our format is going to be determined based on our survey results. Is that correct?
That's correct. So we see ourselves transitioning into stage 2 that week of October 12th. We are looking at a remote learning planning day on October 12th. We'll finalize that and get that communicated out. The actual bringing in of students may not occur till the week of October 19th, but some of the work toward acclimation and getting ready for will begin, and stage 2 begins with October 12th, right after parent conferences. That's right.
Okay. And so as we're doing that survey, is that survey just for the EC through 2 or E3?
No, the survey is being sent to all of the families of all of our students. We're also asking for feedback on our stage 1 on the e-learning, what's worked, what could have been better. Again, we have to be ready to transition back to full remote learning at any time based on whatever whatever comes forward. So we do want to make sure that if we do have to return to complete online for all students, we have feedback on what's working and what needs to be improved.
Will the survey also give parents in that 6 through 12 area an opportunity to express if they feel that their student is a priority, or sort of as we're working with that 6 to 12, where we're going to bring in those students who are educators feel.
So we will intend to follow up at a later date with a more specific. We've made this decision based on survey data. The survey right now on that part is asking if when we transition, will you intend to send your child back, and will your student require transportation? Okay. And then once we have that initial data, we'll work with our administrators and educators to finalize the details of what the plan will look like, and then ask our families will have to then commit.
And so as we're answering, I'm just trying to put myself in the situation, thinking of my own students answering these questions. Is it going to be clear that we're talking about for stage 2 transition, or because there's a difference between, are you comfortable to send your student in for labs and performance classes, or,
Dr. Knowlton, can you recall how it's specifically worded?
Yeah.
For this round, it's written really generically. It's a global question overall. Are you willing to send your child or student back to school? And we're also asking every parent to do it for each child as well. We're also collecting some information about program involvement as well.
That's true. We have some demographic and directory information to ask. Contained within the email that the parents will receive is a link to the executive summary of stage 2, so they'll have that information, as well as our return to learn health guides.
So it will be clear to parents that they're talking about that stage 2 decision then?
Yes.
Okay. So I just want to be really clear about that, because it's a different thing for a parent to understand, am I ready to send them all the way back to school all the way, or am I ready to send them back for, priority classes within 6 through 12? Same for elementary. Are we ready for the stage 2 return, or full back to school? Okay. Speaking of going back to school, as we have collaborated with other districts in that elementary level, what kinds of things are we learning as we're looking towards our EC through 2 going back, in terms of lessons learned, et cetera, in terms of screening, or any kinds of best practices that they've had to be able to really keep that COVID transmission low? And what kind of screening are we looking towards for that EC through 2?
Yeah, we communicate with districts across the county most often, multiple times per week. And so each school district really is in a unique position. And so it's really hard to generalize. There is fairly a strong consensus across the county about the importance of prioritizing the youngest students first. And again, each district, based on their own circumstances, on number of kids in a class, size of classrooms in a school, and input from their stakeholders, have had to make decisions based on their local decisions. So I would say that the biggest lesson learned is the importance of focusing on the EC2 students.
Okay. And then the screening, like what our screening will look like for that group.
Dr. Igo, you want to talk a little bit about our screening process, please?
Screening for health.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. So our process for making sure our students are symptom-free revolves around, we've asked each family to make sure that they walk through and they assume that check their child for those symptoms before that they send them to school each day. By sending them to school, they're self-certifying for us that that student is not experiencing any symptoms, including a temperature. As students enter our building, we will also be taking temperatures just to ensure, as kind of a secondary precaution, any student that is showing a temperature will be sent to the health office to have that rescreened, because temperatures can run high just because you've been outside running or the bus was hot or any of those things. So to make sure we've got an accurate read on that, and if so, then we'll take the steps kind of moving forward. We'll continue to remind our families regularly about what those symptoms are that they're looking for and the importance of making sure their students do not have any before they arrive at school.
Okay, thank you. And then my third question is with regard to remote learning. Can we just reassure our parents? We've gotten numerous emails from parents wanting to ensure that remote learning will continue through stage 4. Can you just restate that it will continue and tell them a little bit more about what that means?
Not through stage 4, until stage 4. The option to remain at home will be in place through stage 3. And then, so the students who remain in that online option will continue to have access to what we offer. The exact details of how that looks will again depend on the number of students who opt to remain home. We are investigating a number of technological solutions that would allow for that synchronous instruction to occur both live in person as well as for students who remain at home.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Paul.
I'd like to insert a follow-up question regarding the screening. I understand what the self-certification is. I understand what temperature checks are. Do we have any plans for any District 203 administered COVID-19 tests that might be given in the building?
We have begun some preliminary conversations with local health agencies as well as some private industries. DuPage County is also exploring some things, so we have begun to look at what that could look like. So we're exploring. We're exploring it. We don't have a final plan for that, or a decision whether we will or not.
Thank you. Do you have additional questions? No. Okay. Joe.
Yeah, to kind of follow up on Paul's question about screening, and are you going to be looking and monitoring the schools individually in terms of numbers of positive test rates and symptoms? And could different schools have a different plan in terms of, a school reaches a certain level and has to go back online, or is it going to be kind of an all or nothing?
So I'll defer to Dr. Igo for anything to add, but again, anytime that we become aware of a positive case, we work collaboratively with DuPage County Health Department and take their guidance regarding any next steps. So Dr. Igo.
Yeah, so as we have a very collaborative relationship with the DuPage County Health Department. Once our students are back for in-person attendance, we will report daily to them the number of students that have reported to us that they're experiencing symptoms who have tested positive. And when they'll use that information to inform us if we need to do something different, or if we're seeing an outbreak, or if we need to close the school for any time or do any kind of different cleaning that's involved. So they'll be working with us to help us understand what we do with the numbers as we provide them to them.
Thank you. And then kind of along a similar line, you mentioned coming up with different schedules and a bunch of different plans. Do you see all of the EC2 and the elementary schools opening the same way, or do you see this varying by school depending on the survey responses from the parents in those schools?
Our intent at this time is to make decisions differentiated by level, either EC, elementary, junior high, or high school, not necessarily differences between buildings at each level.
Thank you. And then in terms of the kind of experience, that learning experience, which, we know is not going to be the way that we normally think about that in-person school. For those students who are online, will they have an opportunity to interact with the students in their class who are on ground? Is there going to be kind of that built in into the school day as well?
In an online setting, they would be.
Right. Over Zoom, do small group work over Zoom.
So right now, we're in the process, like Mr. Bridges said, of looking at different live stream options. And one of those questions that we're asking ourselves is how can we have our students collaborate in that setting? And so that's something that we're currently right now putting cameras in some of our teachers' classrooms to try that, and we're being some of the students. And so we absolutely want to ensure that our students continue to collaborate. They will have in-person, but there also will be some asynchronous time for our students, and that's another time that they can participate in breakout rooms, that they can be led by possible support staff. So we're doing all of the above because we want to ensure that social emotional connection, whether you're in person or you're at home.
Thanks. I think that's really good to keep the classroom community together.
Janet.
I think it makes a lot of sense to focus on our younger students first. At the same time, we are hearing, of course, daily stories and stories of older students, of our junior high and high school students who are struggling emotionally and other ways in the online environment. Can you talk a little bit about any tools or resources that we can have to help them cope, or if there are people in the schools that either our parents or our students can contact to help kind of manage some of these issues and to get supports that they need?
At the 612 level, our counselors, our social workers, and our deans are very much involved in the communication with the classroom teacher on engagement. Just like we did in the spring, we had our teachers reach out to some of our support staff on students that were not engaging or that needed extra support. So this is ongoing at the 612 level with a constant communication between our instructional support team to make sure that our students and our parents have what they need if we see that a student is struggling academically and socially and emotionally. So we have those safeguards in place so that they can be communicated between the teacher and some of the specialists.
My only follow-up to that is if a parent has concerns, especially at that 612 letter, that they reach out to the counselor, and the counselor will be able to start that process for them. Every student has a counselor.
Okay, thank you.
Are you done, Jim? Okay. Charles.
Couple of questions. One, as we move into stage 2, I don't think anybody wants to talk about this, but if things don't trend in the right direction, do we have plans to be able to quickly move kind of back and forth? I know that's like a contingency plan for a contingency of a contingency plan, but can you speak a little bit to?
Yeah, in working with unless there is an executive order, for example, like was done last March, or it's required that we do so immediately. Working with the DuPage County Health Department will provide sufficient time for us to be able to transition into whatever phase we have to, if we're able to move forward, or if we have to go back. So if the DuPage County Health Department right now, based on their metrics, would not necessarily say, tomorrow you have to go to this. It's going to be like looking at our data, here's where we're at. If this doesn't trend better in the next week or 2 weeks, we're going to make this recommendation and provide you sufficient time to prepare for that.
Got it. Is there any consideration to, Janet, you mentioned the idea of this dashboard, and I know that's being considered, but anything in terms of, so for example, someone gave the example of like a school closing, for a snow day, and I know this is very different than that, but I know that sometimes we close the schools because the temperatures are below a certain level. Is there some kind of a metric or set of metrics you can say, if it falls below this or that or what have you, so then the parents can have a little bit of transparency to understand, oh yeah, I heard that went there, so there's an expectation that maybe something is coming.
Do you have anything from the health department, Dr. Igoth, just that in terms of when they make that decision, in terms of like clusters, or an individual case certainly isn't going to require that?
Correct. We have a little bit of information. It would really depend upon how many cases we had and how many close contacts that occurred within that time frame, within that classroom, and whether or not we were able to attribute the spread to happening here within our school building. Sometimes we can clearly say it happened at a party that was off our grounds, and the health department might say, we're not worried about that. So it's so many factors that go in every single time we call. We call and we explain all of the symptoms and things that are happening, and they weigh all those things and say, here are the next steps you should take. So it's not as clean as I think.
I don't know if this is the best way to provide the description, but I think some part of what's frustrating is the sense of there should be a linear flow chart on what if, then this, then this, then this.
Right.
Well, that's not the case. It's something, there's a case or an occurrence, and then it's so many multiple questions that we have to ask off of that.
Right. Then
Depending on the answers to each of those multiple questions, puts us in a direction based on how we're responded. So.
Right. Yeah, I guess for me, the reason for my line of questioning was just to really understand if there's any way, because I think part of the challenge that we face is, Dan, we know that you are looking at like 8,000 pieces of information, you and the team, and such a to say it's multifactorial is an understatement, to say the least. But anything we can do to kind of provide objective trends that people could look up easily and say, oh, you know what? That, like, again, I use the example of the temperature's below 30 degrees. Well, then school's probably going to be closed or whatever. Anything like that folks could easily access. And again, it's not a guarantee that it'll happen, but at least to say, oh, let me start to mentally prepare for the fact that something might be going in the wrong direction. Because I think a lot of this is that a lot of this stuff has caught us off guard, even though it's been going on for a while. We are still, to some degree, being caught off guard as a community, as an individual, as individuals. So anything. Again,
Contained within the executive summary that's posted in board doc is a link to the DuPage County Health Department supplementary guidance for schools in their return to school framework, and that would be the best indicator of the trends regarding the metrics that we're using to make those decisions.
Okay. And my last question is, we've talked about the self-certification, where folks are asked to self-certify. Are there any plans to provide any additional resources beyond just, again, list of what symptoms are, but any other resources to help, parents readily identify the symptoms or what have you, just to have a better understanding? Because I think that's going to be critical. I think as a parent, you wouldn't want to send somebody to school and only to have them have to either come home or have to come pick them up or something along those lines.
Yeah, I think it's really about continuing to send the message. As a society and as a community, we've lived through that. We've kind of built into ourselves that we can push through when we have a headache or we have a runny nose or we have a sore throat, and we really need to change our thinking that any time we have a headache, any time we have a runny nose, any time our throat is sore, that's cause for us to stay home, because that's very much a symptom. And so it's really just about helping to spread that word and helping to people kind of reframe our thinking in terms of how we respond when we don't feel well.
Right. So I would encourage us, again, the more that we can reiterate that, the better, because it's about setting a different mindset, setting a different expectation for everyone. We just have to think about things differently. Thank you.
Christine.
Dan, just to clarify, when you talked about building access, like if you have connectivity issues or like, what could it be? I just need to get out of my house today because my sister's driving me crazy and I'm going to go study in the cafeteria? Or what is that access? Like, are there certain things that you have to?
Mrs. Posey's been working with the secondary principals on that. I don't know if you can give a summary of where we're at on that so far, or.
Sure. We're looking at the secondary level offering, obviously we're prioritizing students just like the elementary with students who may have struggled last spring, as well as have connectivity issues, maybe need additional support with executive functioning skills, being their time management and their materials management and assignments and things like that. So we're also looking at, can we open up the buildings on an as-needed basis, where we can identify students who might just need the time and space to work and have that distraction-free environment where they can have access to connectivity if it's spotty in their homes, as well as other resources in the building.
So those kids would like have to qualify for that?
We would prioritize students who we know for a fact have needed that and haven't been able to engage at a satisfactory level in order to be successful in what we're currently doing. And as the high schools and the junior highs expand their times through stage 2, we would continue to expand the number of students and the prioritization, whether it was by classroom, as Mr. Burgess has talked about, performance-based classrooms or hands-on activities and labs and other priorities.
Okay, so it's not just an open building and drop in and study if you feel like
Correct. We very much have to manage the space and numbers as required by IDPH and CDC.
Okay. And then do we have, it was mentioned earlier, I think you maybe mentioned it, Jane, about the staff getting used to having the kids spread out and what the classrooms are going to look like. And I know at a previous meeting in the summer, we talked about how when we left in March, there was this very real message that public spaces were not safe and schools were not safe at that time. Do you have a sense, is the staff feeling more comfortable with everything that we've put in place? Do they feel like they have a handle on it as best you can before 20 kids come into your classroom or 25? Any kind of feedback from them on just their personal comfort levels?
Some of the feedback that we've gotten from our building principals, and if you just drive around to our elementary schools, our parking lots are full. Parking lots are full with teachers. They are teaching from their building, from their classroom, and I think what that does for our students is gives them a reassurance that my teacher is in that classroom. That must be safe. And so they are learning how to work with the resources within that classroom. But, our principals are saying our staff is here. Of course, we will have some that will have to work with more than others. Just like the continuum of society in general right now. But the majority of our staff is working from the buildings. They feel safe, they feel connected, and they know that they're going to have to implement those safety measures, but they're working as a staff first to do that, to feel it together before they then come and welcome students, which I think builds some confidence for sure on our staff and our leadership.
Donna.
All right, so listening to all this, it never ceases to amaze me how much is going on to get all levels to be prepared for students. So first, let me say thank you to all of you on the cabinet and all of the people that you work with, because we have a gazillion questions and you have absolutely have answers for all of them. So we know stuff is going on. We just don't, and sometimes the community don't know. So that brings me to my communications question. So communication to the community has changed over the course of the pandemic, just based on need. What can parents expect moving forward, like beyond our survey? Is most of the communication going to come from the building level? Just what can they expect?
Yeah, both and. A lot of the messaging will initially come from here. We also know that more parents are likely to read something from their building principal than they are from the central administration office. So, for example, the survey will go out tonight from PSAC, and then we'll follow up under the banner of the Talk 203 for the individual schools, probably on Wednesday. As a reminder that a survey came out, you should have gotten one from us. As we begin to transition, community should expect more communication in terms of preparation for that transition. And I would anticipate communicating greater detail regarding stage 2 next week, which will give families a sense of what we're looking at by the end of next week to plan for that week of October 12th, October 19th, and then for our 3rd, 5th graders, the week probably after that or 2 weeks after that. So as we begin those transitions is when we should expect to see more communication. The COVID webpage, I guess, on our district webpage is still going to be kind of the clearinghouse for where all of our information is posted and shared.
Great, thank you. I know that Chuck already addressed some of the part of my question, which was just comparing opening our schools to other areas. And like, for instance, you addressed the students being in the buildings for YMCA and how different that looks from the classrooms. But I think it's important for the community, and I guess I want, other than myself, but I want a teacher, an educator to explain just how different that is from opening like restaurants and grocery stores and the minimal contact that those employees have with the people that they're interacting with, as opposed to like our teachers, especially our teachers with the younger kids too. Like, I mean, obviously I was a high school teacher, so I know it was not unusual for me to be standing like right next to like, you know, within a foot or maybe even less, you know, looking over their paper. Or can we just give the community a little bit of a sense of just how different that interaction is compared to others? I don't know who wants to take that.
Well, I'll start, and I guess I'll ask team to add into it. But when you think about, to your question, you know, let's think about our EC classrooms or our kindergarten. And then for that matter, you know, any of our grade levels, it's really relationship-based. And there's a lot of planned interaction between the teacher and the students on small group basis or a one-to-one basis, as well as a lot of planned interaction between students in two students or in small groups of students. A lot of historically, in previous to COVID, a lot of sharing of materials and exchange of, you know, materials and resources. And in order to, you know, mitigate the concerns moving forward, those are going to look different. There will be fewer students in classrooms. Social distancing is required. Desks will be all spread out, facing the same direction. Less interaction, personal interaction. And let's not forget, masks will be worn, which our community, our kids should be getting used to as a part of norm. But you think about, you know, those of us who are comfortable going to a restaurant, there is limited interaction. And, you know, it's with you know, certain, you know, precautions in place, PPE and other things to ensure safety. So it's, again, and also thinking about a restaurant, usually a larger space. You know, our classrooms are not as big as a restaurant. So, you know, again, very limited in the ability for movement. So I don't know if any of my team has anything that you'd want to add, but.
I think it's going to be important also for our teachers to think through how do they, even though there's going to be limited movement, how do they build those relationships? And they've, you know, when we brought them in last week, they had great ideas for even, you know, at kindergarten, sharing is such a big piece of how do you take turns. And so they were really brainstorming some of the high priorities for the social emotional connections and how they were going to do that. They come up with the best ideas because they're the experts. And that's something that when we think about that remote planning day, that we want to be able to share across to our educators so that even though we know that they're not going to be interacting as normal as they would like last February, we want to make the best in-person experience for them because we value that in-person learning so much. And our educators can do it.
Thank you. And my last question is, we talked about, I think, Dr. Igo, you mentioned a flow chart for like how we, how long to quarantine students, when they should get tested, how to, I don't know, does it include how to quarantine like in our own homes? What support will families have with the contact tracing? I know that just today I had a family call me and say, oh my gosh, so-and-so, you know, tested positive, and I was with their mom, but not, you know, like, so there's a lot of, like, confusion out there as to how, you know, when do I have to quarantine? When do I have to be tested? When I just think we need to educate, help. I know that that's part of the Department of Public Health, but I think it's also, like, on us a little bit to educate families and to help them make good decisions.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree, and that's certainly something that we have put as a high priority in regards to making sure our families know and understand what it is like when they call in and they provide us that our student is experiencing a symptom. We have a very scripted process that we follow in regards to if you're experiencing this symptom, here's the expectations for that. This is what it means. This is how you need to do that. Here's who you may or may not need to quarantine, kind of based upon that. So we do have kind of a written out process. Our nurses call, they make those connections, they explain it, and then they provide a letter to a family that also explains it. Whether it's a close contact, whether it's a symptom that they've experienced, whether it's they've been traveling internationally, and what does that mean? So that is information we certainly are sharing. We can certainly probably be better about getting it out to people who aren't necessarily calling us with a specific concern, but we can add some of that maybe to our COVID website in regards to what does this look like? What do I do when? We could certainly do that.
Thank you, because I think hopefully our community realizes that as we transition to stage 2, to stay there, it's going to take our community to be doing all these things in appropriate ways to help us stay there. So thank you.
Okay, so looking a little bit more at that 6 through 12 block of students, can you talk a little bit about what kinds of assessment you're doing within the, with our teachers, et cetera, to be able to assess which students will be a priority, as well as how parents, if they are, so Janet talked a little bit about that emotional concern and talking with the counselor. When a parent has an academic concern and really wants to see that their student, that feedback is shared with the people who are making these decisions, how do they go about that, and what are we already doing?
And Mrs. Posey, I'll ask you to speak to that, and then Ms. Willard, if there's anything to add.
Sure. So first of all, globally, we've done some things with our high school students and our junior high both. It's important, the transition students to a new building, and so we have, with our freshmen, both of those have done an orientation where they had to stay outside, but they got to come to both buildings and get to know people and interact, socially distanced with some of their peers, and get to know the building a little bit and some of the personnel. And then the junior highs, the 6th grade has the exact same issue, and so they've done some virtual things, and they are planning to do some in-person things as well with 6th grade throughout stage 2. We prioritize students. We have some data, we look at a number of values or points that we're looking at. First of all, just basic attendance. Are they actually getting into their classrooms? And if they can't or they aren't, why not? And so we have our counselors, social workers, teachers, and deans who are all reaching out to those students and making sure that they have all the adequate supplies and connectivity they have or need, or if it is some other kind of an issue they're struggling with, just like I said earlier, the time management or executive functioning to get those things done, and are the wherewithal and the mindset to do that, and whether or not they're struggling from a social emotional point of view. Socialization at the secondary level is just as important as it is at every other level, and so we're looking actively for activities, and both virtually and in person, that we can do with students to make sure that they feel connected to their school and that they feel like they have a home there. Again, at all levels, they're doing things, everything from scavenger hunts at the junior high level, both virtually and in person and socially distanced, and the high schools, as you heard Shay say, that Mr. NNHS will be performed outside this year, but that's just another way of reaching out and making sure that kids get involved. Obviously, if they have academic concerns or issues, they should reach out to their teacher and make sure that their teacher understands what's tripping them up or what additional support they can get, as well as any kind of behavioral or social emotional issue. They should reach out to their counselors or social workers or deans.
Thank you. Okay, moving along with regard to that 6 through 12, like what this stage 2 is going to look like. Can you talk a little bit about if you have students coming in for a lab or a class that is, like I think we've talked about like a vocal class or choir, how would that work for them for the rest of their day? Because they have that next period that might then not be, in person, it might be virtual. So, how does that work with transportation? How does it work for kids who have transportation, but, it might take time to get home? So how will that work, those logistics?
Sure, and that's tricky because at both the junior high and high school, we are tied to a schedule based on periods and our very strict time limits. But we are working collaboratively within all of our teachers to make sure that we prioritize any of those courses, especially that are graduation requirements or requirements to move successfully from one level to the next. Predominantly, as you can imagine, reading, math, science, and social studies and English. But also those other classes are just as important. They're an outlet for students, and we don't want to miss them, but we also know that our teachers can work together to provide some asynchronous follow-up on those courses that they might miss. Students will not be marked tardy Transportation, whether it's from their parent or they're walking or they're riding one of our instructional runs by buses, they'll all have a space in the buildings to wait for those rides to work asynchronously or work independently on Zoom until they can get home and do the rest of their courses.
Which is again why, back to Ms. Gerke's question regarding just anybody coming in to drop in, we have to be able to create space for students who we are choosing to bring in for when they complete a lab or performance-based course. You know, this space, for example, could be transformed into a large study area spread out with up to 50 students.
And then for my third question, how will we, so we talked a little bit about like how this is going to transition for EC through 2 and for 3 through 5 and 6 through 12. For students who are already coming into the building, those ones that you had already spoken about, how will it change for them in stage 2? Are they ramping up in terms of their level of participation as well?
Absolutely. So those students who are coming in, our goal will be, regardless of whether they're EC5 or 612, will be to have them into minimally some type of hybrid situation. And in situations where we can do more, we will.
So let me reiterate. So IEP's 504s, you're hoping to get them into like a hybrid situation.
Correct.
And if you can do more, okay, great. Thank you. Okay, that's my third. So what other questions we have?
Shay has a question.
Oh, Shay, good. Please go ahead.
All right, so I know that for myself and a lot of my peers, and I'm assuming for elementary and junior high students too, transportation is like a pretty big issue even during the regular school year. So with making sure that we have to adhere to like good guidelines on like buses and stuff, are we gonna be able to make sure that like every student has guaranteed busing again, or is that gonna be like an issue or like an obstacle that you have to get past to go to school?
No, we're still working out the logistics of the scheduling of it, but students who are eligible for transportation will have transportation available to them.
Any other questions? Okay, feel free that you jump in and ask questions when you have them. Okay. Additional questions from the board? Joe.
So Christine's question brought up the issue of connectivity for some students. I'm also wondering about attendance rates. What are they, and have we seen any fluctuation in those rates? And then would things like students who are regularly not in attendance be part of that priority group to get them back in school for whatever reason, connectivity, the home environment, whatever the issue might be?
Yes, absolutely. Those will be some of the metrics that we look at to invite students in as a priority. And attendance has been, I don't have numbers with me, but attendance at both levels has been fairly high up till now.
Thank you. And then in the presentation, you mentioned a couple of the metrics were, the substitute pool and PPE. Can you comment on the levels, the sub-pool level and the PPE accessibility right now?
I'm going to ask Mr. Ross to speak about our sub-pool and then Dr. Igo to speak about PPE.
Sure. On the sub-pool, we have about 10% fewer subs today than we did at about this time last year. That seems to be true in neighboring districts as well. We have been setting out to hire more substitutes and hire more permanent substitutes. We've been successful in doing that in many cases, but then some of those folks have then received full-time offers in other districts, so that we're bringing them in and then they're moving out. We're continuing to work hard to bring them in. We do know it's important to have a good, strong sub-pool, and we're working very hard to make sure that that happens.
In regards to PPE, we have ordered our PPE. It is here, it's available, and it is in our buildings. We're continuing to monitor that. There's a little bit of an unknown in regards to how quickly we're going to go through it and what that's going to look like. So as students come in and we start to see how quickly we're using that, that'll give us an idea of how quickly we're able to replenish it. Our biggest concern really is around some of the more medical-like supplies in regards to an N95 mask or an isolation gown for our students who might have symptoms that are present in our building. Currently, we have enough and we're ready to go. It will just depend on how often we're going to need to use them and then how quickly we can replace them. And that's just going to we're just going to have to experience that to really know what that looks like.
And is it fairly or easier to order now. I know in the some of the IASB workshops that were run over the summer, school districts across Illinois were having PPE supplies back ordered and things even to April and May. Has that kind of cleared up now, and you can get more kind of as needed?
We can get all of the basic PPE without any problems or concerns. The N95s are definitely more difficult for us, and we've had opportunities where we've had some on order and then they've gotten canceled. So again, we currently have enough to get us going and we think we're good, but until we know how many we're going to be using on a daily basis, it's hard for us to know how much where our stock is and how quickly it will be for us to get it. I would anticipate if we see a spike across the country or even here in Illinois, I would anticipate we'll have a harder time getting those N95 masks.
Are you done, Joe? Got it? Okay. Any more questions? Okay. Any more questions down there? Okay. Down here? Okay. So I just have one additional thought, and it is for families that are working on making this decision in terms of, are they comfortable sending their students back? Where would you direct them with questions that they may have in terms of that, decision making? Because, we can't quite give them exact specifics as to what their plan is. It's more, kind of their general sense of comfortability.
Yeah, I'd ask the parents right now, begin by just give us the initial sense of their intent to learn or return. And then it depends on what the question is, specifically what they're wanting to know. I would always begin at the local level, the building administrator, the principal, building administrator, or even the teacher. Start there. But it again depends on the question. And as we share more explicit details regarding the plans, then I would use the Let's Talk platform to ensure that it is archived and we are able to assign it to an owner to ensure that there's an appropriate response.
Okay. All right. Any additional questions from the board?
I just have one last thing, and I want to again thank the parents who stayed here this evening. I also want to acknowledge our educators. A number of our parents who spoke this evening, as well as a number of them who emailed into public comment, either in support of continuing e-learning or returning to full in-person learning, acknowledged and thanked the tireless effort of our professional educators in all of our buildings. And I want to take this opportunity to thank them as well. This pandemic, and by virtue of my position, I have put all of you, our educators, in a very difficult position. I acknowledge and I respect that. And I want to thank you for your continued professionalism and alongside the parents of our kids, your continued advocacy for your kids, as well as your concern for each other to ensure that we are adhering to protocols that are required to ensure that we have a safe return. So we are blessed in this community to have an amazing group of educators, certified and non-certified, who are committed to supporting our kids in everything they do, and we are fortunate to have them, so I want to thank them.
And I think in terms of the board, we have heard so many things, so many stories, so many thoughts, so many emails with concerns, questions, suggestions, positive feedback. And I just want to thank our community for continuing to share that with us. It's something we care deeply about, and as the questions are asked, the answers are found. And so we want to encourage you to continue to express your thoughts, and we want to thank you as well for taking the time to share your positive experiences, because there have been so many individuals, parents, who have written us and said, I want to talk about this teacher, they're doing such a wonderful job, and I want our teachers to know that we consistently hear just the admiration of our community for the kind of job that our educators are doing. So thank you to our community for your passion and for continuing to advocate for your kids. And we ask that you keep it up, because as we go through this together, these are the things that are helping us as a school district to really find the answers to the questions that need to be found. So thank you very much. Sorry, my computer went to sleep here, so.
As you move to sleep, we're moving on to item 8.06. School code in the state of Illinois requires the school districts to report administrator and teacher salary and benefits to the Board of Education, the Illinois State Board of Education, by October 1st of every year. The documentation provided is compliant with school code and reports on fiscal year 1920.
Thank you. Thank you for discussing item 8.06. Are there questions from the board on item 8.06? I see no questions. So we will move to the president's report. I just want to note for our community, recently the school board election packets have become available online through the DuPage County Board of Elections. The school board election will be coming up Tuesday, April 6th. The first day to circulate petitions would be September 22nd, and petitions will be due to be filed December 14th through the 22nd. Every time there's a school board election, we are always announcing those dates so that interested persons can know where to find that information. I also want to discuss for a second with our board. We have recently received the Illinois Association of School Boards report from the Delegate Assembly, the recommendations from the committee in terms of do adopt and do not adopt with regard to the resolutions. And because there is a registration process and it's limited, we want to be sure that we're able to get our delegate registered. So I know that we have not yet put those resolutions and the content of that resolutions packet onto our agenda, and we will be doing that in a timely way so that we can have consideration of those resolutions. But I was wondering if we could just briefly entertain the delegate so that we can have the delegate get registered. My recommendation would be that it be Joe, because Joe has sponsored the resolution and was able to present at the resolutions committee, and I think that it's exciting that they have recommended adopt, but if there's any questions for you to be available, that would be my thought.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that.
Is everyone good with that? Yep. Okay, great. So then we'll go ahead, Joe, go ahead and register yourself for that Illinois Association of School Boards Delegate Assembly, and we'll be excited to have you represent that. And for our community, if you have feedback with regard to the ISB delegate resolutions, we'll be considering that at future board meetings. Yes, question.
So we're going to put on, normally we approve that delegate at a board meeting, so we're going to put that on the agenda for the next meeting then?
Yeah, we'll put it on the October
Great.
5th.
We'll put it on the agenda, but he can go ahead and register himself.
Yeah, he can register now.
Just so that he gets the space. Yeah. Okay? Yep. Okay. All right. That concludes the president's report. Item 8.08, Board of Education reports. Do we have any Board of Education reports this evening? Okay. So then we will go on to discussion without action. We have no discussion without action this evening, so we will move to discussion with action. We do not have discussion with action this evening, so we will move to old business. We have no old business. And we'll move to item 12. We have no new business. So we'll move to item 13, upcoming events.
Next meeting of the Board of Education is Monday, October 5th, 2020. As I referenced in my comments regarding the Return to Learn update, we are tentatively looking at October 12th as a remote planning day. We will communicate that in the coming days to confirm if that we move forward with that, which would mean that there is no synchronous instruction that day, that our teachers are engaged in professional learning.
Okay. So will you be sending that out? Okay, yeah. All right. Okay, wonderful. Anybody else want to highlight anything in terms of schedule events? Okay, then we'll move to item 14, adjournment, and I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
A motion and a second are heard. Please call the roll, Mrs. Patton.
Fitzgerald.
Aye.
Wanke.
Aye.
Gerke.
Aye.
Yang Roar.
Aye.
Leong.
Aye.
Kuzminski.
Aye.
Kush.
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes. We are adjourned. Thank you and good night, everyone.